Avatar. Playing Waterbending. Chapter 41. The news of an approaching army of thousands shook the village. Thousands. What did that number mean? A complete disaster. I walked over to the scout. What did you do first when you saw them? I grabbed him by the shoulders and asked. I turned and ran away, he said. How the hell did you know they were in the thousands? I yelled. The villagers and earthbenders, whose numbers didn't even reach 200, were looking at the ground, their faces sweating. I saw them covering the horizon, so I assumed the number, he said. The villagers' faces lit up temporarily. But they are above 1,000, he added. For certain. It seemed my soldiers' morale was quite low. Well, mine was a bit low too, and I was feeling a bit of fear. No matter how talented your army is, they wouldn't be as strong as the Avatar. Thousands was also a big number. I needed to raise the morale of my men, and women, a bit. I walked to the center and yelled, everyone. They turned their attention to me. We've been preparing for this for so long, I said. The firebenders and their soldiers will taste a battlefield where they can't bend. They will be crushed and burned by their own fire. Their armor will be their graves. Their tanks will be what crushes them. Aren't you excited to crush them? There was a moment of silence. But soon, I got an answer. Yeah, we've been training for so long. I'm excited to see them. With the strategy we have, even if they were tens of thousands, they wouldn't stand a chance. Let's fight them. I clapped my hands and said, okay. For now, let's not get too excited. Let's activate the traps. Yes. Right. The plan. The villagers started becoming active, following the strategy I had discussed with them. They took the explosive powder we had been making and went outside the walls. Come on, I thought. It's not time to fall back. As everyone started working, I decided it was time for me to preserve my energy. I needed to rest well and then spend my energy wisely on the day of the battle. For the last few days, since Katara had arrived, I hadn't spent my experience points and had been focusing on training the earthbenders. Now that everything was complete, I needed to conserve as much energy as possible. I wasn't in a hurry to use my points. But for certain, I needed one thing. Title slots have been upgraded to 2. 50,000 accumulated experience has been used. For the next upgrade, 100,000 experience points are required. What a generous system, I thought. It wants me to turn into a mass murderer. I sighed and left for my tent. I grabbed a bottle of expensive alcohol or wine bottles that I had stolen from the commander's chamber on the ship. I poured myself a drink and started drinking. Ryak, can I come in? Katara's voice called. Before I could even give her permission, she entered. Sure, I said, looking at her blue eyes as she scanned me. You've managed to convince a few hundred people to stand against a large army, she said. I want to know how you have so much courage. The real question should be, why? Why? She asked curiously. You'll have to wait a couple of days first, I said teasingly. What's the point of suspense? It's not a children's story that Grandma tells to pass the time, she replied, frustrated. Do you really want to talk about the war now? I asked. She shook her head. I wanted to check if you're okay, she said. You've gotten a bit pale. I smiled and looked at my hand, which was quite white now. Seems I can't say, escape, in Japanese during this war. Katara held my hand and sat beside me. I looked at her for some time. Both of us were adults, and we were in a tent. During times like this, cortisol, the stress hormone, takes over the body. You know, it makes one lose sense and do whatever they can to relax. There was one thing I could think of as I looked at her blue eyes, full lips, and exposed neck. Wanna relax a bit? She asked. Definitely, I said, shaking the bottle of alcohol in my other hand. Wanna try? What is it? Fruit juice. She mused. Alcohol. We don't have it in the South Pole, but it's quite good, I said. Well, not that good the next day. And weed is better. Like seaweed. What's weed? She asked. No. It's just good stuff, I said, taking a gulp from the bottle and passing it to her. She took a big swig at once. It's quite acidic, and bitter, she commented, exhaling loudly. But what's the fruit? I guess it's grape wine. It's quite tasty. I replied. Sure. She nodded and drank a few more gulps before passing it back to me. So, earlier, I said as I wiped the corner of her lip with my finger, when you asked me if I wanted to relax, what did you mean by that? I meant what I meant, she said. The last time I was nervous, when Rakasha, or when I thought she would snitch on me, I kissed you. Did it help you relax? I asked curiously. Katara, or women from this world in general, were quite different from those in my previous life. They didn't go through high school drama or anything. Not to mention, we grew up in quite an isolated place. So, I was a bit curious about her perspective. Well, it felt like I could leave without regret if I did the things I wanted to do, she commented, looking into my eyes and then at my lips. I got the signal and responded. Also, if you think about it, we weren't used to drinking. Things got out of the usual routine. Her cheeks were already getting rosy. Well, one may leave after 2 days, I said, grabbing her chin with my fingers and slowly approaching her. I kissed her for some time. Her response became more aggressive as she kissed back. I didn't know what came over me, but I responded with more aggression, pushing her back and moving my lips from her mouth to her neck. There was a small moan that escaped her lips each time I sucked on her neck, which meant it was her sensitive spot. Ryak, what if someone comes in? She said, panting slightly. Oh, we'll bend it out, I replied, not really knowing what I was saying. I mean, well, everyone's too busy. You're afraid your brother might come in. That would be traumatizing. Don't worry. I saw him going to comfort some village girl, I said. No one's coming in. It's my first time, she said. Can you be, gentle? How did you know you need to be gentle? Can't tell you. Girls talk, she said, hugging me, her lips landing on mine. I pushed her onto her back and got on top of her, grinding something else other than my levels for the first time. We all make mistakes. Some are big, some are small, and some make you discover a new type of bending to deal with the big mistakes you make when you get drunk. I looked at the notification I had received a day and a half ago. You've discovered cum bending. Plus 3000 EXP. I had never known the system could play jokes. I was standing at the top of the wall, looking at the huge artificial black cloud covering the sky. On the ground, an army was marching. I was standing at the top of the wall, looking at the huge artificial black cloud that covered the sky. On the ground, an army was marching. The sound of drums echoed in the air. The earth benders, who stood by my side, were excited, but their reactions varied. Following the steady beat of the drums was their unsteady heartbeat, thundering in their ears. Some had sweaty faces and looks that were unsure of victory. I had to show an image of a leader so they wouldn't feel fear. Okay. I took a step forward and stood on the edge of the wall, which was about 10 meters high, made of rocks that had been bent into a neat shape. They'll be here soon to talk with us, I said. But on my signal, you'll follow the plan. Yes, Captain. Yes, Commander. Yes, sir. Since I was a temporary leader, the Earthbenders hadn't yet accepted my military rank. We're not soldiers to talk like this, I assured them. We're brothers. Ah, that's cute, said an old woman, earning chuckles from the men around her. The longer the time passed, the clearer the image of the approaching army became. They were now about 40 to 50 meters from the village. The fire soldiers, all dressed uniformly, covered the horizon. I couldn't count how many men were behind them. But among them were many tanks. There were even a few bands playing drums here and there. From what I saw, it didn't seem like they were here for a war. More likely, they were here for an assured victory, a total massacre. Ryak, a man with long silky hair tied in a ponytail, stepped forward and shouted. The sound of the drums stopped. Yes, I replied calmly. I assumed they knew my name, as I had made the warden mention it in his report. Before I massacre everything you fought for, I want to know, he said, what gave you the courage to challenge our glorious nation and start a rebellion? The pussy of your mother, I replied. I hoped Katara wouldn't take my taunt seriously. I see. You're as rude as the envoy has said you are, he said. Be prepared to pay for your crimes. In your next life, remember not to cross the line with the Fire Nation. I raised my hand and waved it down. Around 6 earthbenders took a step forward. They moved their hands and thrust forward. Next to their feet was ordinary dirt dust, which soon turned into 6 tornadoes that flew in different directions. The fire soldiers covered their eyes. Some of them laughed. He's seriously trying to kill us with dust. Motherfooler. Is he trying to get us dirty? The barbarians don't know we can take showers easily. The dust tornadoes weren't meant to hit them. Before the fire soldiers arrived, I had instructed my earth benders to pour explosive powder, made from sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal, and wood dust, into various spots. Thanks to the wind generated by the dust tornadoes, the explosive powder was stirred up, and its particles flew through the air, filling it. The army behind the front lines started to notice the strange dust and its odd smell. Are they trying to choke us to death? So insolent. The soldiers wearing masks didn't seem to be affected. The one who appeared to be the commander said, "Those who aren't wearing masks, put them on. If you've forgotten yours, cover your face with a towel." They did as instructed and covered their faces. At this distance, there was no way for my earth benders to ignite the powder. But I had already come up with a solution. Many solutions, actually. I extended my hand to the left. Haru handed me a bottle of alcohol with a towel in it. I grabbed a lighter and ignited the fire at the other end of the towel. Thanks to GTA, I'd learned many things. I used my Kai bending to boost my power, then got into a throwing position. I threw the alcohol bottle high into the air. Just as it was about to contact the dust, someone attacked it with rock, making it explode in the air. What idiots, trying to fight firebenders with fire. Okay, plan B. I thought. A water bottle on my waist transformed into an ice spear, which I threw at the commander. The commander took a bending stance and tried to shoot a fire beam at me. Boom. Boom. Just so you know, the dust tornado didn't make all of the dust fly, and there were still traps hidden. But dust explosions have a unique mechanism. First, if you ignite a small fire, it spreads and creates a small shockwave. This causes more dust to spread, and that dust explodes on its own, creating a bigger shockwave and a bigger explosion, and it continue. But I didn't just use normal dust, I used explosive dust. A very loud sound, similar to that of a shotgun but hundreds of times louder, erupted. The firebenders caught in the middle of the dust were hit. A bright light covered my vision. Not only that, but more explosions could be heard from the hidden traps. You are eligible for shared experience since you threw a spear. Calculating. The earth benders and I, out of fear, covered ourselves and ducked behind the wall. Once the explosion stopped, we slowly stood up. The smell of fireworks filled the air, and so did white smoke. Is everyone alright? I yelled, but I barely heard my own words. My ears were ringing, and I could only depend on my sight. I saw the earth benders looking healthy and fine. They, too, stood up. We looked at the battlefield, and let me tell you. It was nasty. And by nasty, I didn't just mean dead bodies lying on the ground. There were barely any dead bodies here. Some limbs had been scattered. I looked toward the horizon. The only survivors from this army were the people in the back lines who hadn't reached here yet. And they numbered fewer than 1,000. 1, 2, 3, I counted the people in lines, then columns. This method wasn't very accurate, but it gave me an approximate number. Surviving soldiers. Around 400, I thought to myself. You have earned a title, Warlord. Warlord allows you to gain a share of experience in wars through the hands of your followers, as long as you issue the command. A share of the experience. Meaning I get less if I don't do things alone. Shit. Quickly, I thought. If I get a share of the experience with the title, then how much would I get without it? Title has been equipped. Recalculating the casualties using the title. The system has completed the count. 3,600 soldiers, including firebenders of mixed ranks, have been defeated. Do you want to show the details? Just show me the experience. I waved my hand in the air, swiping the screen. You've gained 500,000 experience points. What? I opened my eyes wide. 500,000 experience points. That was too much to process at once, even for me. It was like a full month of grinding. But on the other hand, we had trapped a lot of enemies in the explosion. I had just received a share of the experience points, even though the earthbenders didn't. I guess it was because I had a partial hand in the job, and thanks to the title, I got this reward. Had I killed or defeated all those soldiers on my own, I would have been entitled to between 2 million and 4 million experience points. So, that's the power of hunting thousands, I thought to myself while waiting for my ears to stop ringing. I'll make sure to clean up areas with dangerous beasts. I thought about going down and defeating the remaining firebenders. But come on. That's a feat only someone like Madara Uchiha or the Avatar could pull off. I wasn't a one-man army. And the idea of me going down there and fighting all those soldiers while having blind spots was ridiculous. If I had bloodbending, I might have been able to pull it off. Wait a second. Kum bending is a sub-bending of waterbending. I might be able to twist their balls easily, I thought. But I'd rather not take a stupid risk and die stupidly. Not until I spend the experience points I've earned, which I'll save for later, after taking down the remaining enemies. The ringing in my ears calmed down, and I could hear more clearly now. The earthbenders were in the same state. They looked over the top of the wall, excitement taking over their faces. We've taken down the army. The Fire Nation soldiers didn't stand a chance. It's an assured victory. We should attack them now. Yes. Let's jump over and finish them off. I raised my hand and ordered, no one moves until I say otherwise. Huh. Why wouldn't we move? A middle-aged man, quite large, grabbed me by the shoulder and said, we have to strike now while they're weak and shocked. With metal bending, taking them down would be child's play. I grabbed him by the shoulder and pressed. You idiot. What we have here are people who spent years in jail without proper physical activity. By the time you reach the back lines of the Fire Nation army, you'll be exhausted. Even if you win, you'll die. But, I'm trying to preserve as many lives as possible, I said. You can go alone or take those who support you, grab some dust, and try your luck. But I don't think the same trick will work twice. The moment you throw dust at them, they'll ignite it, and you'll kill yourself along with your enemies. Do you want to die? But we can win with metal bending. He objected. Let them approach first, I said, pushing him back into the line. I looked into the eyes of the earthbenders, who were excited but also deeply pondering and reflecting on my words. I was being completely honest. This war had happened because of me, and since I didn't want them to lose their lives, I had taken responsibility for saving them. I had saved my people by shifting the Fire Nation's attention to this village, and now I was saving them again. For now, we will wait. I ordered. This is an order. I turned my head. There was a reason I was confident they would attack. The Fire Nation soldiers had taken many days to arrive here. If they wanted to retreat, it would take just as long. If they turned their backs to us, we could still attack them, and they knew it. On the other hand, explosive materials weren't something new to this world. They knew we were out of ammo. And from the explosion that had just happened, although a few tanks had been destroyed, they still had a high chance of surviving such an attack. So, if my guess was right, they would send the tanks now. They still had a numerical advantage and could easily defeat 100 earthbenders. I believed they had the statistics on the prisoners and knew how many earthbenders we had. With 400 or so soldiers, they had a high chance of killing the earthbenders. First, they'd crack the wall with their tanks, then kill us. At worst, they'd approach and hold the wall, trying to starve us out or wait for backup while preventing us from setting more traps. And then, our trump card would be played. That's, Haru, who was standing next to me, said, horrifying. There's barely a recognizable corpse among the enemy. Do you remember what the envoy said? I asked, trying to remind him of what would have happened to us. Yes. Everyone would die, and they wouldn't spare anyone if we didn't give up our lives, he said. But do you think they'll just turn and run away? Just because there are enemies doesn't mean they're not human, I replied. And I don't mean that in a good way. Humans are cruel, emotional creatures. They'll take time to reorganize themselves and attack us. You seem quite confident, he mused. They don't have another choice, I replied. Unless I'm too stupid to see the bigger picture, they have no option but to attack. If they expose their backs to us, we'll chase them and unleash dust tornadoes on them. Since the earthbenders could control earth particles, they could ignite the dust from a distance. You might be wondering why I didn't let them ignite it earlier and instead wasted an alcohol bottle with an ice spear. I could give you 500,000 reasons for that. Oh, it seems you're right, Haru commented. They're sending the tanks first, Tyro pointed forward. Is this the time for the metal benders to shine? Wait, I said, looking down as they approached. After the tanks came within 50 meters, they paused for a moment. We didn't do anything. Another 400 or so soldiers advanced. A few of them tried to shoot fire blasts, which hit the wall. They're out of bombs. Dirty earth benders. Be prepared to pay for your tricks. I smiled. The water from the nearby barrels floated up and landed on my back, forming tentacles. Everyone. I shouted. It's time for a face-to-face battle. Crush them. 200,000 experience points have been used. Waterbending up to level 13. Skill tree has been upgraded. You are now a fully fledged Grandmaster Waterbender. Aqua Sense has been perfected. 300,000 experience points have been used. Waterbending up to level 14. You are now a Great Grandmaster. You have achieved the level of Great Grandmaster. Bending with the mind has been upgraded. Can now use humidity to sense surroundings. Plus skills. Water telekinesis has been acquired. Like any successful capitalist entrepreneur, I used the acquired experience points to upgrade my waterbending. But man, I almost felt like my head was about to snap off my neck. The information overload and the new muscle memory were overwhelming. As the earth benders jumped from the wall, the water tentacles moved in front of me. They no longer felt like water I was bending, they felt like extensions of my body. Thanks to my aqua sense, they felt like limbs. And thanks to telekinesis, I could control them like limbs. In fact, I could reshape them like limbs. The ends of the 8 tentacles turned into hands with 5 fingers, and I could clench them. This was a whole new level of waterbending mastery. I jumped off the wall, using the water to slide down and lessen the impact of my fall. It was enough to land without breaking or cracking a bone. I looked at the soldiers, their eyes red. I guess they had been crying while charging at us. A few firebenders took their stances and aimed a combined fire stream at me. One of the tentacles turned into steam. You know, a liter of water, when turned into steam, can occupy a much larger space. The tentacle collided with the fire, and since it was steam, which is wet, it absorbed the fire easily. The steam didn't stop until it covered a few firebenders. They had heat tolerance, that's for sure. But cooking them wasn't my goal. The steam then cooled down instantly, turning into water before freezing. One of the soldiers managed to come at me from my blind spot. But I could sense him somehow. His shape, his appearance, his height, and even the size of his, well, you know. I could see it all without having to look at him. I guess this was a perk of spending millions of experience points on my waterbending. I pointed my hand at him and used freeze palm from a distance. When I first acquired this skill, it took time to activate, and even more time at a distance. But as I leveled up, the required time decreased. And now, after gaining a few levels in a row, I wanted to test it. The soldier who jumped at me was just 1 meter away. Less than 1 second. That's all it took for the fire soldier to have all the water in his body turn into ice. I took a step aside, letting him complete his jump. As he landed, he fell like a statue, white mist flowing out of his body. That was completely broken. But considering the amount of experience I had spent on my waterbending, it made total sense. And speaking of broken, the earth benders were thriving. I looked at Haru, who simply stood facing a tank. He stomped on the ground, and the tank flipped. He then pushed his hands forward, and the tank moved like a rock, smashing through a line of soldiers. The others worked in sync, showing how overpowered teamwork among metal benders could be. I watched as armored soldiers flew through the air. How in the hell is this happening? The tanks. The Fire Nation tanks were crushing themselves, and the soldiers inside didn't stand a chance. The bodies of the Fire Nation soldiers flew through the air and crashed into each other. Others had their armor squeezed around them, suffocating them to death. They shot fire streams left and right, but the earth benders, now metal benders, didn't give them a chance to aim. It was a total massacre. Seeing that I might only get a portion of the experience, I decided to take my turn. I steamed the water tentacles, turning them into concentrated steam that occupied a large space. I swept the steam over the Fire Nation soldiers, freezing it on them and turning them into ice statues. Since they didn't have the light spirits on their side and weren't the avatar, they were obviously dead. Seriously, who could survive being frozen if not the avatar? Not even the fiber in food remains intact after freezing and thawing, let alone a living organism made of complex proteins, blood, glycogen, and other stuff. Even if their bodies were preserved, there's no way they'd remain the same. I didn't hear the notifications for a simple reason. I had deactivated them so they wouldn't distract me. I looked at the mist in the air and decided to go all out. Otherwise, I'd lose a portion of the experience points to the earth benders, metal benders, and dust benders. I used my Kai bending, controlling the mystical energy and creating an aura around my body. I felt more powerful and faster. At the same time, I knew I wouldn't last long in this form, so I had to make the most of the time I had. I dashed into the mist, part of it following me. I met the first enemy and placed my hand on him. Steam rose from his body as I used dehydration palm, taking his life in an instant. I could sense 4 more firebenders surrounding me. When you're at a disadvantage or advantage in battle, the most efficient strategy is to take down the enemy's leader. It's like taking the queen in a game of chess during the endgame. I stopped in place and waved my hand, bending the steam to surround the firebenders. I used the steaming skill to raise the temperature to the maximum. The steam didn't just heat their skin, it entered their bodies through their noses, ears, and mouths. And unlike fire, steam doesn't burn, it cooks. Burns are caused by dry heat. Scalds are caused by wet heat. Once the steam passed over them, they dropped dead. I continued fighting, and so did everyone else. The Firebenders and Fire Nation soldiers who had been on the offensive turned and started to run away. The Earthbenders, who had been oppressed for 17 years, 15 years, 10, 5, whatever time they had been captured, didn't let the chance slip to unleash their anger. Wild screams echoed in the air, drowning out the cries of the armored men flying through the air. Their numbers dwindled. And soon, roars of victory could be heard. The steam surrounding me scattered, and I panted, having used a lot of Kai. The battle is over. Calculating. Host defeated 30 firebenders and 50 normal soldiers. Counting masters, non-masters, martial artists, and their skill levels. Thanks to your command, your men defeated 350 soldiers. Counting. Waterbending plus 20,000 experience points. Kai bending plus 5,000 experience points. You've earned 150,000 accumulated experience points. I stood up, drained of chi energy. But the roars of victory gave me the strength to at least remain on my feet. I smiled, seeing how happy everyone was to have won. It was also a relief that none of them had died. Sure, there were a few who had been caught by the fire beams and had burn marks on their bodies. But those injuries weren't anything that a little healing couldn't fix. Besides, Katara was here to help me, and she was exceptionally talented at that. Ryak. All hail Ryak. The earthbenders surrounded me and lifted me forcefully before throwing me into the air. Guys, stop, I said, but my voice was drowned out by their cheering. I thought. You see, using double speed and power while bending came at a cost. Combining two powerful skills, one of which allowed me to push past my human limits, while the other was above what any human could pull, had left me feeling utterly drained. But seeing them so happy, I endured. A bunch of middle-aged and old people throwing me around, I thought. I feel like some washed-up singer at a reunion party. Finally, they put me down. Okay, guys. You've had your fun, I said, standing up as normally as I could. I didn't want to show any weakness, so I acted as if nothing hurt. So, what's next? One of them asked, and the rest turned to me, waiting for an answer. First things first, I said, pointing to the battlefield. You'll finish your job. I was pretty sure most of them would understand why I asked them to do this, but not all of them. They started talking among themselves. But they're already dead. He's talking about burying the bodies. You know, the rot, the smell, the diseases. Even if the village is far away, with so many dead, the stench alone would knock us out. I see. That's a good point. But there are too many of them. Ah. A few of them groaned. Seriously, these guys were earthbenders, not ordinary citizens. Just divide the work among yourselves. 10 of you work for an hour, then switch out until it's done, I said. But if you don't like it, figure it out yourselves. Sure, we'll figure it out. Unlike what I had expected, the work was done very quickly by just 10 earthbenders. They simply walked around, made a few movements, and the blood and bones were buried beneath the earth. To anyone looking at the battlefield now, it would seem like a farming field. That's what I thought as I stood atop the wall and looked down. However, farming here was out of the question for now. I gazed over the horizon, realizing that we hadn't killed all the firebenders. There must have been scouts who had witnessed the battle, and they would have reported it, not just to other bases, but to the Fire Lord himself. We had done something unprecedented, defeating an army 40 times larger than ours. We had used explosive powder, something this world had yet to discover. More importantly, we had revealed 2 new types of bending. If you included me, that made 3. But I wasn't as significant since I was just one man. The Earthbender's new abilities, however, would be a major concern for the Fire Nation. The Fire Nation had always held a significant advantage over Earthbenders, whose strength lay in the earth, thanks to their advanced technology, which relied heavily on metal. Now that we had shown the world that metal benders existed, the Fire Nation couldn't afford to sit still. If more Earthbenders became metal benders, the Fire Nation would lose everything they had fought for. They would prioritize us above all else. We couldn't defeat them if they launched an all-out war against this village. We wouldn't be able to gather enough materials to create the explosives needed to wipe them out. Not to mention, now that they knew we had explosives, they could adjust their strategies. If I were them, with a massive army and knowledge of explosive powder on the ground, I would divide my forces and send small squads from different directions. I would also force captives to wear Fire Nation armor and masks, sacrificial lambs. Once the lambs were dead, I would confirm that the enemy's ammunition was depleted, then send another squad to verify. Once certain, I would unleash my entire army. You know what that means. Even with 100 metal benders or dust benders on steroids, they wouldn't be able to withstand attacks from all directions. Chief, now that everything's done, what's next? Camus, a young man who acted as a scout, approached and asked. I sighed heavily. They were still treating me as their leader, even though the battle was over. For now, they should focus on preserving their lives. But I didn't want to ruin their moment of happiness by telling them what might come next. That would make me a killjoy. I turned to Camus and said, obviously. Obviously what? He asked. I forced a smile. Drink and party all night. But where would we get drinks? He asked. I pointed toward the horizon. You see, when a large army like this comes to conquer a small village, I believe they set up supply tents along the way. I also think they brought drinks to celebrate their victory. Go and collect everything. Do you think the drinks survived the battle? There's only one way to find out, I said, pointing. Now, go. I shouldn't have asked, he grumbled, but he did as he was told. Surprisingly, I was right. The firebenders had brought all kinds of tobacco, alcohol, cigarettes, hookahs, and even different herbs to smoke. I was tempted to see if they had marijuana or coca plants. If they had coca plants, taking down the Fire Nation would be too easy. Just grind it into powder, supply it to the Fire Nation, then cut off the supply and only give it to the Fire Lord's palace. That would spark a civil war. I shook my head, dismissing the idea. There was no way that would work in the short term. The Sozan's comet would arrive by then, and the Fire Nation would send their squads to conquer any city that hadn't fallen in the last 100 years of war. Some played drums, while others drank heavily and danced. I sat in a corner, watching them. I guess ignorance really is bliss. We had won a battle, but not the war. Still, I supposed it was all right to enjoy what we had, even if it was temporary. After all, life itself is temporary, yet we still party and try to be happy in the time we have. Why do assholes like the Fire Nation have to ruin people's happiness? I thought. The Fire Lord wants to be the Phoenix King, all to satisfy his ego. He's willing to do all of this just for that. Kings were the ones who caused people's misery, and for a very simple reason. You see, before becoming a king, one had to be a prince. Princes were raised with inflated egos from childhood, taught that they were above everyone else. And that wasn't even the worst part. Most of those who became kings had to use dirty tricks, poison, schemes, and betrayal against their own family to achieve their goals. Someone capable of that could only be a psychopath. And the royal system of succession favored such individuals, those who could kill their own family for power. If Ozai was a psychopath who became king that way, what about his father, grandfather, and so on? Anyway, I'll tell them to pack up their stuff tomorrow. No, I'll need to hear their opinions first, I thought. What are you overthinking about? Katara's voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked at her. She was wearing a light blue dress and holding 2 bottles of wine. I raised an eyebrow, amused. Didn't think you'd get hooked, I said. Wish it were more private around here, she replied, handing me a bottle. But we can enjoy what we have. I'm not sure it's the right time for me to celebrate, I replied, looking at the bottle and wondering if I should drink or not. I had too much to think about. No, I had one thing to think a lot about: what to do next. I needed a clear mind for that. If I got drunk, I wouldn't be able to think straight. You might say I could use waterbending to remove the alcohol from my body, but I was too exhausted to heal anyone, let alone myself. I needed real, natural recovery. And since Katara was planning to get drunk, I couldn't trust her with my entire body, just a part of it, if you know what I mean. She placed her hand on my shoulder. Ryak, I know you're thinking about what happens next, she said. But trust me, you're not the only one. How about loosening up a bit? Everyone else isn't thinking about it because they trust me to handle it, I said, exhaling in frustration. They're literally putting everything in my hands. Guess that's because you're overqualified, Katara said, holding my hand. Come on now. Fine, I replied, opening the bottle and drinking half of it in one gulp. It was a good way to let the stress out. Ryak, how about this? Katara said, glancing around. Her eyes fell on her brother, who was talking to some woman. You'll pretend to have hurt your hand, and since you're too drunk to heal it, I'll take you to your place and fix it. My hand. It's paralyzed. I grabbed my left hand and pretended to be in pain. You caught on too quickly, Katara whispered, forcing a smile. I need some healing, I groaned. But I've used up all my energy. I'll help you. Let's go somewhere quieter. The noise will interfere with the healing, she said, helping me up. I turned to the soldiers and said, don't worry. It's just a quick check-up, and I'll be back. They'd forget about me in 5 minutes anyway. Most of them were already drunk. The palace of the Fire Lord was in an uproar. After the Falcon delivered the message about the battle, the main palace, which typically wouldn't be concerned with minor village occupations, gathered all the higher-ups for an emergency meeting. Generals, commanders, and governors were summoned immediately. While waiting for the Fire Lord to arrive, the higher-ups talked among themselves. What do you think this is about? Asked General Sai. Commander Ruzo, sitting next to him, replied, did the Avatar wake up? If he had, we would have heard about it before the Fire Lord. Hush, you don't want to sound disrespectful, do you? Ruzo turned his gaze toward a specific spot where someone had just arrived. He whispered, she's even more ruthless than her father. Sai turned his head. A woman around 18 years old, with long, silky black hair, a curvy figure, and piercing yellow eyes, took a seat. She was the prodigy of the Fire Nation, a master firebender by a very young age and capable of defeating anyone as a young teenager. She sat down with a deadpan expression, yawning. What's this about? She grumbled as she settled into her seat. This was the prodigy, known as the widowed prodigy. Despite her age, no one dared to approach her for marriage, not even governors or ambitious politicians. And for good reason. Though she was strikingly beautiful, she was also terrifying. Of course, no one would dare use that title in front of her or her father. Well, no one would use it at all within the palace walls. The snitches were working overtime these days, and they didn't even need payment. We're still trying to figure that out, Princess, Sai said, forcing a nervous smile. Why, of all people, did she have to sit next to me? If I say something wrong, I might be executed, though, I wouldn't mind if she stepped on me. What are you thinking about? Ruzo asked, noticing Sai's dazed expression. From this angle, it looked like a tent was forming in Sai's lap. Ruzo kicked his friend under the table, trying to snap him out of it before he got himself killed. Ah, right, Sai said, snapping back to reality. He scrambled for something to say. I was wondering if Prince Zuko is coming back. The exiled prince. Ruzo played along. But I heard he's on a journey to find the Avatar and can't return until he succeeds. Azula interjected, even if Zuko found the Avatar, there's no way my father would wake me up this early just for that. As expected of the princess. Your reasoning is flawless. Your brilliance always shines, princess. Azula rolled her eyes. More sycophancy. She was already sick of it. But for the sake of her beloved father, she decided to endure the meeting. She'd also be lying if she said she wasn't curious about what was happening. The Fire Lord has arrived, a man in royal court attire announced. Everyone in the room stood as Fire Lord Ozai entered. Ozai took his seat at the head of the table. You may sit, he said. The crowd observed him carefully. There were signs of anger and nervousness on his face. Dark bags had formed under his eyes, though he had tried to conceal them with makeup. The room fell silent as everyone sat down. We will now begin the meeting, Ozai said, his voice firm. I don't want to hear anything about finances or rebellions. We are here to discuss the matter at hand. I'll be direct. Recently, we sent a punitive force of 4,000 men, supported by our latest technology, to attack a village defended by only 100 earthbenders. Can anyone guess what happened? It was obvious something had gone terribly wrong, which was why the Fire Lord had called this meeting. But seriously, how could a minor village cause such a stir? The earthbenders must have had help, someone suggested. Perhaps the Avatar has appeared, Ruzo said. Sai shot him a wide-eyed look, as if his idea had been stolen. Others began sharing their theories. What if I told you, Ozai said, cutting through the chatter, that those 100 men, led by a single waterbender, managed to decimate a significant portion of our forces? How is that possible? It's impossible to imagine. A for thousands losing to 100. Ozai placed a document on the table. According to the Scouts' report, the earthbenders have developed a new form of bending called dust bending. They filled the battlefield with an explosive dust so powerful it could send our tanks flying, unlike anything we've seen before, such as wood dust. So, they've developed a new explosive weapon and a new type of bending, said an old man with a beard that reached the floor. We could steal their technology and use it for ourselves. Additionally, if they rely on dust, we can develop strategies to counter it. The other problem, Ozai continued, slamming his hand on the table, is that after the dust explosion was over, 400 of our soldiers bravely charged forward, thinking the threat was over. But the earthbenders had also learned to bend metal. They toyed with our soldiers and tanks as if they were nothing. Do you understand what this means? The council was at an uproar, and they started whispering among themselves. The earthbenders, according to the reports, they were imprisoned in metal cells and subjected to hard labor for up to 17 years. It's no surprise they learned to bend metal. Then the small rebellion led by Ryak is just a distraction, another official suggested. If the metal benders were the true leaders, they used Ryak as a decoy to mask their knowledge and lure our army into a trap to test their new abilities. Others nodded, agreeing with him. Do you really think a bunch of brainless barbarians could invent a new type of explosive? Ozai asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Azula raised her hand. Speak. Ozai granted her permission. It's true that earthbenders aren't known for their intelligence, Azula said. But what we do know is that they've mastered metal bending and have access to a new recipe for a powerful explosive dust, which they'd abuse it to the limit. It doesn't matter who came up with it. What matters is stopping them from spreading that knowledge. Without our machines, these new benders could flip the odds in the war. Of course, I could easily defeat them myself, but our armored soldiers would be helpless. Azula was confident in her abilities. She had fought earthbenders before and could easily deflect their attacks. She had even used to parry flying rocks with her hands. But facing explosive dust while wearing heavy armor would be a different story. So, everyone must understand, Ozai said gravely, that we may be losing the 100-year war very soon. The prison rig must be our highest priority. Gather all soldiers from nearby bases. Command the Navy. The operation will be led by a capable general. This is a full-scale attack, Ozai added. As the sun was rising. I'm retiring, I declared to the crowd standing in front of me. Looking at their faces, I could tell they'd had a rough night at the party. Well, I'd had a rough celebration myself, Katara and I. But back to what's important. Now that the war was over, and I'd taken responsibility for shifting the Fire Nation's attention to the village by saving it, I was finally guilt-free. Although it was cruel to wake everyone up this early after a hangover, I had to deliver a message quickly. What do you mean? Haru stepped forward and asked. Yeah, Tyro nodded. It's not like you're 70 years old. It was obvious to everyone that I no longer wanted to lead them into battle. I get it, they love me, and it's hard for them to let go. You see, guys, I smiled and clapped. Last night, I had a moment of mental clarity, and this morning, I've thought a lot about it. And, a middle-aged woman asked. We're going to face a full-scale attack from all directions, I replied. It's a no-brainer that the Fire Nation now considers us their greatest threat and will move to eliminate us immediately. An old man smiled. There's no way the news could reach the Fire Nation that quickly. I thought so too. But let me ask you this, I said. What's the fastest messaging bird? In my previous world, there was a small falcon that could fly faster than 300 kilometers per hour. In this world, the animals were stronger and different. Well, not just the animals, there was Zuko, who could break metal chains with a single kick, and old men like Iroh, who could throw boulders twice their size. Imagine what kind of speed and power the wildlife here possessed. Yes, I get your point, said a man who sounded like an expert, his voice tinged with sadness. But there's no way the news could reach the palace that fast. There's an entire sea to cross. And while animals are fast, they don't have that much stamina. I had thought the same thing, or at least I had, until I delved deeper into it. They answered me. Does the Fire Nation have naval bases on islands in the sea? I asked. They do. Yes. That's how we lost the war and got captured in the first place. It's thanks to their numerous naval bases. Oh, I see it now. The super-fast falcons wouldn't need to cross the entire sea to deliver an emergency report. A messaging bird could stop at one of those naval bases, which would then send another bird. Alternatively, the Fire Nation might have developed something similar to radio signals and a code system, though I doubted they had. I could dwell on this and let my mind spiral into conspiracy theories, but I decided to plan for the worst-case scenario. That's why I'm retiring as a battle general, I said. And before anyone says that building a large army takes time, let me remind you that producing enough explosive powder to wipe them out would take even longer. Not to mention, they now know what kind of weapons we have, and they'll adjust their strategies accordingly. Earthbenders, we're not dealing with brainless creatures here. The villagers looked at each other, considering my words, and soon, they began to nod in agreement. Can anyone guess what I'm thinking now that we're the Fire Nation's top priority? I raised a finger. Obviously, we do what they fear most, spread the knowledge, Camus said. I was impressed. For the first time, he'd said something intelligent and correct. You have a plan, don't you? One of the villagers asked. I nodded. Not so much a plan as a suggestion. You can ignore it and settle somewhere else, living your lives guilt-free. I think the idea is to head to one of the major cities and spread the knowledge. Ba Sing Se or Omashu would be the obvious choices, someone suggested. I clapped for whoever made that suggestion. And, I prompted. And, what else? If you can think of it, so can they. While they're gathering their army, they'll have units stationed along the way to intercept us, I said. It wouldn't be difficult for them. That makes sense. So, what do you suggest? Divide, I said. We'll split into several units, around 10, with myself making 11. Each unit will head to a different city. I'll go to Omashu myself and take Katara with me for educational purposes. Katara smiled slightly and turned her head away. Sokka looked at me with wide eyes, visibly shaking. Oh, come on, Sokka. Last night, I saw you flirting with someone else's sister. Let your sister follow her heart, and don't tag along. Please, don't tag along. But wouldn't it be dangerous to go alone? Haru objected, placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm powerful enough, I said, taking his hand down. I turned to the remaining crowd and continued, and that's why I'm taking the most dangerous route. Obviously, the Fire Nation will focus their guards on the paths to Omashu and Ba Sing Se, or any other major city. Take rides with you, and let the non-benders scout ahead. If they don't return, or come back running, you'll know what to do. Also, I forgot to mention, if you meet fellow Earth-benders in other villages, train them and bring them with you. You'll be safer that way, I added with a heavy sigh. I know this plan isn't foolproof, and the survival rate won't be 100%. But I hope we all make it through this alive. The villagers, earth-benders, dust-benders, and metal-benders, sighed as if accepting the harsh reality. The sense of empowerment they'd felt just a day ago had faded like dust in the wind. But that wouldn't go to waste. They would rekindle a new hope, one strong enough to push the Fire Nation back to their homeland. I looked at them and said, don't worry. This is just a new beginning. If 100 metal benders could toy with 400 fire benders and their tanks, imagine what thousands, or tens of thousands, could do. Also, here's some advice. Instead of relying solely on explosive dust, try gathering glass and grinding it into not too fine powder. Glass wasn't just light, it was incredibly sharp. When turned into small shards mixed with earth particles, it became both a poison and a weapon. Inhaling even a little would destroy the lungs almost instantly. Glass dust. If it's not ground too finely but into thin, sharp blades, breathing it would mean certain death. And not breathing it would mean being cut by tens of thousands of tiny blades, literally. I smirked. Hey, don't over-rely on it. Always check the wind direction first. And wear face masks when handling it. The villagers packed up their belongings that day, gathering all the glass they could find and grinding it into powder. As they worked, Katara approached me and took my hand, starting a conversation. So, what educational purposes were you talking about? She asked, holding my hand. I meant waterbending, I replied. But if you want, I can teach you more. She narrowed her eyes at me. Sounds like you've learned a lot. Yes, I nodded, catching her hint. I mean, you can build ice shelters if you know how to make the ice cold enough, or set traps to wake you up while sleeping in the wild. And do you know about cabbage? It's delicious, and I have plenty of it. And what else? She asked. What else? I echoed. Aren't you going to admit that you're a playboy? She asked. Do we even have that word in the South Pole? What does it mean? I asked, raising an eyebrow. For that matter, where did you learn that word? Sokka's villager friend called him that, or accused him of it, and told him to leave her alone, Katara explained. Ouch. I placed a hand on my chest, feeling a pang of sympathy for the poor guy. Rejection could only make him stronger. It was something every man had to get used to, unless they wanted to stay virgins forever or pay for it. In this world, I doubted there were any known places for that. Plus, STDs were real. I didn't even want to imagine what kind of viruses existed in the Avatar world. I sensed Sokka approaching through the moisture in the air. He had a packed bag on his back and said, so, what else? Great. A third wheel. You're tagging along. I asked with a frown. I need Katara, Sokka replied. There are chores to do. Besides, I can't trust a man traveling alone with my sister. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Katara smiled bitterly. That would be wonderful. I'll dump him once we reach Omashu, I thought to myself, glancing south. Yeah, I'll write him an apology letter saying I had urgent business and needed a capable bender, so we had to leave early to fight an imaginary enemy. I sighed. Anyway, we should get moving. Where? Sokka asked. North. We'll ask for directions and then head to Omashu, I replied before putting my fingers to my mouth and whistling. Lucy, who had grown into a 2.5-meter tall tigress, came rushing toward me. One couldn't forget their pet, and ride, now. I patted her head. I decided to take one last look at my stats. Skill trees. Waterbending 14. Kai bending 11. Martial arts 9. Skills. Hunting 9. Steaming 9. Fishing 4. Freeze 11. Stealth, passive 10. Titles. 4 halves. The Deadly Ice, equipped. Shadow Lurker. Beast Hunter. Warlord, equipped. Accumulated experience, 400,000. After departing from the village, Ryak led the siblings and a tiger in one direction on their journey to the city of Omashu. Over the next several days, he had been teaching Katara waterbending, which she was picking up very quickly. At the same time, the Fire Nation's reaction didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the continent. All of their attacks and offensive forces had left their positions and headed to the southwest. Such a massive movement couldn't go unnoticed. The scouts who had reported to the Fire Lord had been captured by an opposing force, and they had spilled everything they knew. When the Fire Nation forces arrived at the village, they found it empty. Soon, wild rumors spread across the continent. A massive army of firebenders, a considerable force, had been defeated by fewer than 100 people, leaving a stain on the Fire Nation's pride. Some people claimed that the Fire Lord's blood pressure had raised because of this, and his health was getting worse. Even if the rumors were true, no one could blame the Fire Lord for having such a reaction. Despite the extensive search for the Earth Benders, no one had found them. Wanted posters were plastered everywhere, targeting those who were known. The highest reward was for Ryak, dead or alive. Of course, Ryak remained unaware of this even after a couple of weeks. Sokka sat by the campfire, barbecuing a rabbit he had caught. Katara stood by the river behind him, practicing waterbending techniques against her boyfriend. Ryak stood in front of her, hands in his pockets. She stomped, pulled her body back, and then pushed forward with her arms, creating a wave from the river that surged toward Ryak. Ryak placed his foot on the wave. It might have seemed like he intended to kick it away, but instead, he stepped onto the water and rode the wave backward. The water climbed up his leg and began to freeze. Her ice has gotten colder, but it's still not enough to give anyone frostbite, Ryak thought to himself, smiling. Guess it's the system's advantage to let me raise my freeze level. Katara was picking up the lessons he had been teaching her quickly. At this rate, she might even reach a bending mastery of level 10 soon. In just 2 weeks of guidance, she had easily reached level 9. Since he had been the one to teach her, Ryak felt a sense of pride. He clapped his hands, and the ice shattered, splitting the wave in two. Sokka blew on the crispy skin of the grilled rabbit. The rich aroma hit his nose, and his mouth began to water. A water wave suddenly hit him, drenching both him and his food. He frowned. He had tried to tell the two to cool it down, but they never listened, continuing their practice. When he had argued with Ryak, the latter had told him he could always go somewhere else to cook his food. Of course, Sokka, who had recently begun to appreciate the wonders of women, couldn't leave his sister alone with Ryak. No offense to Ryak, he was an awesome guy, responsible, and had a sense of humor that made him trustworthy. But Sokka was too young to become an uncle. As the older brother, he felt it was his duty to protect his little sister. Katara spread her hands, clapped, and then waved them downward. Water rose from the ground, forming a surface above Ryak before turning into ice needles that rained down on him. Ryak shifted his body, creating a water barrier. It was obvious he could do this with just a thought, using minimal mental effort. But he was teaching someone who couldn't do that yet. The needles hit the dense water barrier and slowed down. The water, thickened by bending, was perfect for defense. Of course, one could make it spin, but he would leave that for her to figure out. Ryak began punching ice balls out of the barrier, which Katara tried to dodge. Eventually, she slipped and fell. When I said I don't like my meat dry, this isn't what I meant, Sokka muttered, looking at the now soggy grilled rabbit. He took the rabbit away and reignited the fire to crisp the skin again. Let me help you, Ryak said to Katara, taking her hand and helping her up. She chuckled. I lost again. Over the past few weeks of traveling, Ryak had been teaching her, and they had sparred regularly. After each sparring session, Ryak would stand behind her and correct her stances. She couldn't focus much during these moments, as something would press against her, and it wasn't his hand. She would suddenly feel very warm. You're improving at an incredible rate. Don't let it get you down, he replied. Yes, sure, she smiled at him. But it seems like I'll never reach your level. Who knows? He replied, glancing at the sky. It looks like the full moon is approaching. She nodded. I've heard it increases the power of waterbending. It definitely does, he said. Though, I was wondering about another effect. Water bonding? She asked with a hint of mischief. Over the past few days, Ryak had grown more comfortable telling her dirty jokes, and she had started joking back. But this time, Ryak wasn't even thinking along those lines. He was considering that bloodbending was out of his reach because the system determined its level. He was confused about whether he needed to level up Kai bending, waterbending, or both first. But at the same time, Katara wasn't bound by the system and could potentially learn it. Everything has its pros and cons, even a gaming system. For example, someone with an HP bar could heal instantly by drinking water or consuming items. That might seem awesome, being able to regenerate in front of others. But imagine this scenario. What if they just survived a battle with only 5 or 1 HP left? What if their friend slapped their back so hard that those last HP points were depleted, and they died? A normal human would just smile through the pain. Everything has its ups and downs. There's no denying it. On the other hand, leveling up his skills through the system was much faster. He didn't need a teacher or a guide. Just practice and gathering experience points through hunting would put him at the top. He could level up certain aspects that people in this world couldn't, such as freezing. In the series, ice rarely killed, but his ice could easily take down giant insects. I won't give up. I'll keep lifting weights with water until I can lift a body with blood, he thought. Ryak. Earth to Ryak, Katara waved her hand in front of his face as he zoned out. Sorry, I got lost in thought, he replied, pulling her closer by the waist. Ryak, I'm up for a quickie if you want to let loose, she whispered, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Oh, look at that. Sokka isn't the only one getting wet, it seems, he joked. Katara chuckled but suppressed her smile. You want to stay cold. I better shut my lips, Ryak said. Let me help you with that, she said, kissing him. The next day, Ryak and the siblings arrived at a bustling city. The streets were alive with activity as people moved back and forth. Merchants lined the streets, offering their wares. It was clear that this was a prosperous city, and, more importantly, it wasn't occupied by the Fire Nation. The people dressed in green, trading with the Earth Kingdom's currency, which looked very different from the Fire Nation's money. How did Ryak know? Well, it was obviously not the South Pole's currency, nor was it the Fire Nation's. I'll have to exchange my loot and get Earth Kingdom currency, he thought. At the city entrance, he paused. He saw a familiar face on a wanted posters board. Seriously? Sokka said, looking at the poster. This isn't even a Fire Nation occupied place, yet they have wanted posters for justice. They have a big note saying the rewards can only be paid at Fire Nation posts, Katara added. Seems bounty hunters aren't concerned about the 100-Year War, Ryak sighed. I look quite handsome, though. His eyes fell on his own poster. Dead or alive. Wanted for crimes of rebelling against the Fire Nation, prison breaks, killing higher-ups, creating explosive bombs, and committing war crimes. What the hell? Since when is killing an occupier on your own land considered a war crime? The answer was obvious. History is written by the victors. They're just being salty, Sokka added. Then his eyes widened. Look. 100,000 gold coins from the Fire Nation, better dead than alive. I was quite surprised. And 1,000 gold coins from an Earth Kingdom city, only alive. I'm wanted on two sides. I guess the other Earthbenders, who spread my teachings to the world, didn't steal the credit from me. It was now obvious that I was known as the inventor of the metalbending training method. I had also made the Earthbenders learn my teachings by hacking their brain chemistry, literally. So, I might even be wanted by allies. I smiled, looking at the poster. I felt a sense of pride. My heart had toughened up from the many recent life and death experiences, so I didn't feel any fear. You know what? All I need is to wear a straw hat. I'll gather all the treasure I can, oppose the Fire Nation, and then call my treasure the One Piece. When I die, I'll yell that the One Piece is real. Sounds like an epic ending. Or better yet, I'll make a speech. Fame, money, power. Don't take my thoughts seriously. I was just having childish fantasies. What? At least it's not some ecchi anime type fantasy. That's quite a sum of money, Sokka commented exaggeratedly. I think we should turn you in. You're not acting like a good brother-in-law. Brother-in-law, I said, grimacing and calling him in the most annoying way I knew would trigger him. You can't seriously take a joke, Sokka exhaled a long breath. I'd save you after turning you in, you know I would. I put my hand under my chin. Now that you mention it, 100,000 gold is a lot of money. The most I've collected from soldiers was silver, and only a commander or captain had a few gold coins. The warden of the prison, who had a village paying him high taxes, only had 30 gold saved. I mean, no one would earn 100,000 gold in their entire life working normally. Katara looked at me with wide eyes. Are you insane? They want you dead more than alive. What assures you they won't kill you on the spot? Matter of fact, if they cuff you and throw you in a metal prison, you're as good as dead. Katara, we're just joking, I sighed. As for her question about what assured me I wouldn't be killed. I may not be a bloodbender, but I can bend them nuts. Joking, my ass. I know my brother, and I know you. Neither of you was joking, she yelled. I placed my hands on her shoulders. I could tell she was repulsed by my crazy idea. I gave a side glance to Sokka, who just moved his eyes up and down. We'd discuss a plan for that later. Who knows? If we're patient, we might even raise my bounty. Sorry, Mom, Sokka apologized. It's not that serious. Yeah, Katara. You should know, when men joke, they act honest because they know they can't do it. So, even if they're honest, no harm can be done, I said, scratching my chin. Her anger was justified. But come on. To make money, you need to take risks. High risk, high reward. If there's a chance on the day before we kick out the Fire Nation, I'd turn myself in. By that time, I should be a bloodbender. And then, I'll steal their money. My desperation to become a bloodbender was stronger than Vegeta's desire to become a Super Saiyan. I entered the city with the siblings and exchanged some of my money for Earth Kingdom currency. Katara went to buy new dresses and other things. I helped her since she hadn't brought any money from the South Pole. As for Sokka, he kept looking at me with puppy eyes the whole time his sister was shopping. Out of pity, I gave him a t-shirt I had stolen from a Fire Nation soldier. As for why I was buying clothes for Katara, it wasn't just for her joy. It was for mine. I wanted her to look good so I could enjoy staring at her more. As for Sokka, I had no use for him looking good or bad. All I needed was for him not to yap at me for not getting him anything. Aren't you being too harsh on him? Katara whispered to me. He's a man. How many times does he change his clothes? I asked. I get your point. Once or twice a week, she replied. He can wear the same outfit for a month if I don't yell at him. He also needs to learn how to earn money, I nodded. Anyway, I'll be walking around to buy a few things. I needed some groceries and other items the market had to offer. Since I had looted a lot of soldiers, I had plenty of money. Not as much as the 100,000 gold reward on my head, but enough to last me a few years without worry. Maybe even a few decades. And what's the point of having money if you're not going to use it? Okay, be careful, she said, her voice tinged with concern. I smiled. That's for sure. No. There may be bounty hunters around. Free money, I shrugged. If it's you, I shouldn't be worried, she sighed and shook her head. We'll meet again at the entrance. Once you're finished, head there. I then began shopping for what I needed. As I was browsing, my aqua sense alerted me. This new sense didn't just alert me to the shapes of things surrounded by water, giving me extra sight. It also picked up waves in the air, including sound from a distance. If I heard something interesting, I could focus on it. Yeah, smash him. That's why they call me the boulder. I need to learn how to shut it down, I thought to myself. Ignore it until you don't have to. I have 6 senses, or 7 according to some. My brain can't process all of them at once. Wait a second, the boulder. That sounds familiar. The boulder, I thought of the material earthbenders usually bend and throw. But the name reminded me of someone who always yells and makes funny faces, like a WWE wrestler. The only difference was that the latter followed a script. Oh yeah, replied a soft, girlish voice. And I'm the blind bandit, the greatest earthbender. Greatest, my ass, he replied. You can't even bend metal, and they say there's a bunch of them out there. But soon, the boulder seemed to regret his words. Oh, ouch. Sounds of the boulder getting smashed and groaning could be heard. Sir, are you okay? The merchant in front of me asked. It seemed I was too immersed in the conversation, and he thought I was sick or something was wrong with me. At the same time, he didn't seem to recognize that I was a wanted man. Forget it, I waved my hand, turned, and walked away while continuing to listen. It was a no-brainer that the person I was hearing was Toph. Toph. Unlike what the boulder said, she really was the greatest earthbender to exist. Someone who could learn metalbending just because she was teased into it. Well, maybe since she's older now, but in canon, I didn't consider her the greatest, in my own opinion. To me, for now, it was the Mad King, Bumi, the greatest earthbender. But that could be different since Toph is older now. Bumi had enough experience to bend earth while trapped inside a metal coffin, unable to move a limb. That's what you'd call the greatest earthbender. Even during the Sozon's Comet in canon, when firebenders were on steroids, he was smashing them up. The voices continued to echo amidst the cheering of the crowd. And I'll have you know, I see without my eyes what people can't see. Your ego is way bigger than your tiny worm. Wah. Okay. Enough using waterbending to eavesdrop on people's conversations. Matter of fact, the fact that this girl can see you as if you were naked in front of her, see what's in your pocket, what's behind you, and all. Not to mention she's an adult in this world, made me reconsider approaching her, fearing some harsh comments. What use would I have for her anyway? It's not like she could see the entire ground and underground, locate Wan Shitong's library, and give me a good clue about when the comet would arrive, so I could know if I should prepare the metal benders or strike the Fire Nation before it's too late. Hold on a second. She's not completely useless. I needed to know when the comet was going to strike. I had no way to find out, so I didn't think of it and focused on what I could control instead. And with her talent, she could take earthbending to another level. In the show, she was around 12 and could do a lot of things, already a master of earthbending. Now, she seemed older, and I didn't know her current level. Katara, who had been clueless about waterbending despite not having a teacher, had discovered a few interesting moves when I arrived in this world. So, Toph could be way better now and more useful. At the same time, this made me think of people like Azula, who were already monstrously talented in the show. And by monstrous, I mean her talent, not her looks. She already had the potential to be a stunning beauty at a young age. If she hadn't lost her mind by now, I wondered what she looked like and how skilled she was at firebending. Also, she's a lightning bender, my perfect counter. I exhaled a sigh, deciding to refocus on the topic at hand. Toph could be useful. And it's not like I had to worry about the canon and future events causing a butterfly effect. My existence alone had already destroyed all future events and thrown this world's fate into the unknown. So, no more harm could be done. And so I had decided. So, why did you gather us all of a sudden? Sokka asked. I thought we were going to find a motel and then keep moving onward. Why are we here? Yeah, that was the plan, but suddenly I found something interesting, I said. Interesting. Like what? Katara asked. I wondered if I should tell them about Toph. But I didn't want to use the excuse that the spirits told me, especially since I was about to say she's the most talented earthbender I know. So, I decided to let them see her for themselves. Honestly, I was already tired of making excuses in my life. I've gotten so strong, and if I keep going, I'll be strong enough to do whatever I want. Building up such an ego didn't leave room for excuses. You'll see, I replied. Okay, Mr. Mysterious, she shrugged. We stood before a staircase guarded by one man. This is private property, he said. I looked above him and saw a sign that read, Butterfly Public Bath. We're here to watch the tournament, I said, putting my hand in my pocket, accessing the system, and grabbing some money from my storage. I placed a few silver coins in the guard's hand, and he smiled. Welcome, sirs and madam, he said, pointing us in. I don't remember in the Avatar that they charged a fee to get in, I thought. Then again, in canon, they didn't try to execute Haru. The ice didn't smash someone's head into shards. And as far as I've seen, the rocks here could smash a head flat. I guess this is what it means to be R-rated. This tournament could also be a lot farther from Toph's home. We descended the staircase. What greeted us was the sight of a large arena, filled with people in the spectator seats, cheering for the fighters. You brought us here for her, for what? Sokka asked, looking around. His eyes scanned the crowd before falling on a tall, curvy girl with huge breasts. How did I know? Well, my eyes fell there too. Call it an instinct. But he stared longer than I did. For what you mean? I replied with a chuckle. Man, I totally get him. Living 18 years in the South Pole with no attractive women around who weren't his sister could be tough. Speaking of tough, where was Toph? I turned my head. We're looking for a talented earthbender to recruit. Maybe teach them metal bending and then let them spread it, I said. If they're good enough, I might recruit them. Why? Katara asked. I've got a feeling, I replied, that we'd be more trustworthy to earthbenders if we had one traveling with us. Why didn't you take Haru? She asked. She was making a smart remark. You see, Katara, that day, I drank so much thanks to you. I smiled at her, and she blushed, embarrassed. So, when I figured out the Fire Lord's scheme, I decided to make the best course of action, though it was a bit rash. I could tell her the real reason, that I knew Toph from the canon and she could find a library in a desert and be useful. Sure, she might take the news of her being a fictional character in another world where people made countless hentai drawings of her well, though I was being sarcastic. Yeah, right, Katara nodded. Rumor has it a massive force was gathered to eradicate the metal benders. It's good you thought of that in advance. Since no one knew what might happen, I considered leaving the method for training metal bending in a scroll. It might take a long time for people here to learn metal bending without me helping their brains, but they had enough time to train in this city. They would definitely spread it to other cities and eventually across the whole Earth Kingdom. Okay, Katara, find a seat, and I'll join you soon, Sokka said. It was obvious he was going to talk to someone. Me too, I said. Why? Katara asked. Because I'm going to place some bets, I clapped my hands and smiled. Ryak, this is gambling, Katara warned. It's something everyone's parents warn you about. Even my grandma said to never gamble when you leave the South Pole. I smiled widely. It's not a gamble when you know the winner. I walked to the counter where bets could be placed for the next match. I read the names, and I found the blind thief among them. I pulled out about 10 golden coins, put 8 of them on the blind thief, and 2 on a random person. I knew the gambling houses. They like to minimize the image of their dark horses. And if you have a perfect win streak, they'd suspect you of cheating. After all, they cheat you for your money, but they don't like being cheated themselves. I went back to my seat and waited for the next matches to unfold. The random guy the first placed a bet on Juan, and Toph then appeared. She was around 16, no longer that cute kid, but now a cute woman. She was a bit below average height with a ripped build for a woman, though not overly buff. Her chest was modest at best, and she had a perky butt. Her silky black hair, pale skin, and pale eyes caught my attention. Not bad looking, I thought. Let's see her skill. Is this the one you bet on? Katara said, looking at the ticket in my hand. Yes, I nodded. She's blind, you know that. Katara rolled her eyes. If you wanted to waste money, you could just buy more clothes. I know, I agreed. Why did you bet on her? She asked. Seeing her question my judgment, I decided to tease her a bit. Wanna make another bet with me, that she'll win? I said. She crossed her arms and thought for a bit. What do I get if I win? Anything you want, I said. And if I lose? She asked. Make me an offer, I demanded. Okay, anything, she smirked. I smiled and clapped my hands. I was feeling lucky today. Needless to say, after Toph started fighting and seemed to hold back a bit, I won the bet. Katara wore the most bitter smile I've ever seen. For the record, don't even think of saying something like bringing another woman or whatever, Katara snorted, crossing her arms. I was going to say a blow job, but whatever, I shrugged. What's that? She asked. Yeah, we were still working on the waterbending techniques. I'll explain later. I stood up. I'll be back. Then I went to the counter and placed another bet on Toph. This went on for 3 rounds. After the second time, I noticed something strange. She was giving me that look. You know, she's blind, but I could swear her head was following me, even without looking. Both of our senses worked differently, and I believed she was aware that I was aware of her. My aqua sense allowed me to see the shapes that the water pressed against, making it like a blind person using their hand to understand how someone's face looks. But in my case, I could wrap around the whole body. Toph's power, however, is quite different. She can feel the variations from the ground. She can tell the pulse. She can sense if you're uncomfortable, angry, happy, lying, or not. She could even predict your next move. The more she followed me with her head, the more my heart raced. It's not because I was uncomfortable being stared at. Don't look at my package. She's not looking at my package, right? The referee, who was announcing the matches, followed Toph's head, and his eyes met mine when I sat down. Toph whispered something in his ear, and I could hear it. Tell that guy over there to come over. We need to talk. That guy. Who? Wait a second. Isn't that Ryak? He said. The one who's known to invent metal bending, who also happens to be a waterbender. She replied. Yes, it seems to be him. His eyes are blue. But blue eyes aren't exclusive to waterbenders. There's a minority, but he looks like the poster. Haven't you seen it? I'm blind, can't you see that? She waved her hand in front of her face. Though they were whispering, I could hear them clearly. I sighed. It seems he can hear us too, Toph said, looking at me and smirking, waving her hand for me to come over. Look who we have here as a guest, the commentator, or referee of the underground matches, said, looking at me. We have the one and only, Ryak. The waterbender, steam bender, and metal bending inventor. The coldest nightmare of the Fire Nation. Everyone turned to me. Looks like you're famous, Katara commented. It seems so, I raised an eyebrow, not feeling like going down into the arena. I've had my share of life or death fights, and I preferred not to force myself into a situation where I had to fight without the need to kill. Would you like to come to the arena, sir? The referee asked. The crowd would love to see your skills. I waved my hand in rejection. Don't be a puss, Toph stepped forward, putting her foot next to my seat. Let's have a chat now, shall we? Excuse me, do I know you? I asked. Seems so, since you placed all of your money on me. Well, most of your money. But didn't you think I wouldn't see through you? She said. I forgot. She was a lie detector. Guess if I wanted to lie to her, I'd have to go the old school route. Half truth, half lie to throw them off. Or maybe just twist the truth. Let's put that to the test. That never happened, I blinked twice. Well, she could never have seen me placing the bets. Forget about it, she said. I'm the blind thief, and you can call me Toph. I won't beat around the bush. How the hell did a waterbender invent metal bending? I've seen a cute girl do it, I replied. Who is she? She asked. As a matter of fact, she has the same name as you, I tilted my head and smirked. Toph looked at me, confused for a second, as she tilted her head. Tell me, are you a psychopath? She asked. What? I blinked twice. No. But honestly, I was wondering myself. I had been an ordinary man in my previous life. Someone who had been mentally conditioned by society. Killing was like a taboo. Our brains had been programmed to shake an act out of place in case we made a crime, even by accident. Yet, you know that policemen feel no hesitation when they pull the trigger and kill someone on their first day, and act as if they did something wrong. Here, in this world, I had killed consistently. I had started with the snitch. And I ended up with many bodies on my hands. But to be honest, I didn't believe I did something wrong. At the same time, I didn't know why I wasn't acting as dramatically as I'd thought I would. That made me think there was something wrong with me. Well, it's not like I considered it a big deal in the first place. Okay, you're not, and I don't know what made you believe so. So, you were not lying, she demanded. But it doesn't matter. Hand me the method for metal bending now. Somehow, her comment made my eyelids twitch. Hold on a second. If I said I'm not a psychopath, and that makes me not one because I was lying, what the hell? But hey, if Toph said so, what would it matter? I shrugged. Now, she was demanding the method to train in metal bending, and not in the most indirect or polite way. I sighed at her. Despite being older than the show, she was acting like a child. I decided to tease her a bit. What if I don't? I crossed my arms. She put her hand under her chin as if thinking. That's a good question. I have many answers for that. Would you like to give me a rating? I'm not a scholar, I replied dismissively. Okay, get down to the ring, she said. I'll smash the shit out of you. Then, you'll be a good boy and do what you're asked to. I rolled my eyes. Katara was looking at me strangely at first, her eyebrow narrowed. She had been told that I was here to pick some guy and spread the metal bending teachings. Yet now I was acting reluctant. Now that Toph was threatening me, Katara was shooting her glares. So, you're saying I should teach you because you're going to beat me? I replied. Yes, easy peasy, she replied. Okay, I sighed. How about this then? Let's have a bet. If we fight and I lose, I'll teach you. I could somehow feel something she was trying to hide. I may not be good at reading emotions from the vibrations of the ground, but I could tell she was quite desperate. No. More than that, her ego was hurt. She, who considered herself the best earthbender in the world, couldn't achieve what a bunch of old people had achieved. It was also fun to tease her. You're smarter than you look, she nodded. Yeah, as if you looked at him and came to that conclusion after a careful examination, Katara interjected. Why don't you go away and play with the other earthbenders while you've got time, before I stand up and beat you up? I raised an eyebrow and kept nodding, somehow feeling proud that she was standing up to Toph's teasing. Wait up there, little girl. I've got business to finish with your man. Don't worry, I won't steal him. Katara was about to stand up, but I held her still with a pat on the shoulder. Okay, I said. And what if I win? Ha ha ha. You still think you have a chance after what you saw? She mocked, then got nearer and whispered in my ear. To be honest, I was holding back, not to make things boring. What if I win? I asked again. Like your girlfriend said then. Anything, Toph said, very confident she wouldn't lose to me. I resisted the urge to smile. You heard us. I read your lips, she replied. Now, get to the ring. Sorry, won't do, I rejected and waved my hand. But you just said you would fight. She frowned. Yes, I did, I nodded. Why are you backing out now? She asked loudly, putting her hands on my shoulder. She was strong for her size. I could already feel some pain in my shoulders. If I win, I'll lose my money. Go there, finish the tournament, and we'll have a fight, I said. I just have one more fight left. Don't move from your place. It'll be quick, she furrowed her brows. I could tell she was a little pissed off. Well, it wasn't a problem to me if she had to delay her business with me. Wait a second. Could she be losing on purpose because I teased her and she was in a hurry? She was already rich, so the tournament money wouldn't mean anything to her. I handed the gambling ticket to Katara and said, change the bet. Quickly. Katara nodded, not understanding why, but she did as she was told. Toph's next opponent came. Toph raised her hand. I give up. I'm too tired. You win. Huh. You heard me, she said, then jumped off the ring. There was an uproar. The referee, the competitors, and everyone else were in an uproar. My eyes were on Katara. She gave me a thumbs up. Okay, I smiled. Currently, we were outside. It was getting late, and it was night. It's getting late, shouldn't you be at your parents' house? I asked her. I'm on the run, she replied. Not the first time. Too much detail, I thought but didn't voice it. If memory didn't betray me, at the show, when she was 12, she was frustrated with her parents treating her like a disabled child and overprotecting her to the point that people didn't even know they had her as a daughter. Most of the earth benders I knew had tanned or slightly tanned skin. But Toph was so pale she could be called white. Her skin looked like it could be eaten alone. I raised my head, looking at the sky, thinking of a pink elephant to wash away the impure thought. I didn't want her to feel my blood pumping somewhere. Okay, we're going to start, I declared. Just so you know, there's no water source nearby, she said. You're afraid that it won't be fair for me. I just don't want to hear you nagging after you get beaten up. Well, nothing will change, with or without water. Okay. I placed my hands in my pockets. Toph took her bending stance, and I looked straight at her. My saliva started gathering in my mouth. At the same time, I decided to use some of my saved-up experience points. Steaming up to level 10. Steaming up to level 11. 90k accumulated experience points have been used. Waterbending wasn't deadly because it could just freeze, or it could be easily manipulated, pushed, or pulled. But also, with the right pressure, water could be sharp, and it could even slice metal. The most common problem for a waterbender was the volume of water. But with steaming, that volume can expand significantly. Seriously, spitting at me. Toph furrowed her eyebrows, clenched her fists, and stomped on the ground. A big wave of earth flew from her feet, making the earth tremble while dust flew off the ground in a straight line heading in my direction. I thought about stomping back. Yes, I had been around earth benders a lot, to the point I knew how they bend, but that wasn't my style. The spit I had sent earlier didn't fall on the ground or touch Toph's face yet. It floated in a straight line toward her. At the same time, I was in a bit of trouble myself. I had to dodge. So, I jumped to the side. Toph, seemingly having predicted this, waved her hand in a chopping motion, sending a flying rock toward me. Thanks to my martial arts skill tree, I tilted my head backward a bit. The rock grazed my skin. I'm still going easy. Don't you want to give up yet? She asked. Well, I replied, I'm gonna cook you now. With what? Those small eggs. She taunted. I pointed at her with my hand, unaffected by her useless taunt. The spit I had floating next to her suddenly vaporized. Toph, who could see through the ground, couldn't see what was flying in the air. So, a wave of sudden heat must have startled her. What started as a small drop of water expanded largely, putting her in an oven-like state. I pressed the steam as I clapped my hands, pushing it forward. The steam moved in a straight line. She crossed her arms. I focused the steam on certain parts, making cuts in her arms around the corner and one cut on her cheek that caused blood to start flowing. Scalds appeared on her skin instantly. If I had wanted, I could have focused all of the steam around her head. Also, it seemed I had underestimated the heat of the steam after leveling up twice in a row. That was one of a kind spit roast, she yelled in pain, tears welling up in her eyes. She raised her hand, seems I'm trapped in this hot thing. Steam. You got it, I replied. No wonder that spit took forever to fall, she sighed. Despite her best effort to appear tough, she groaned and flinched in pain. I walked to her, grabbed a bottle of water from my waist. What are you doing? She asked. Are you going to abuse a lady in pain? Shut up, I replied as I bent the water to move around her and circled it around her body. They're healing, she said, blinking a few times. It tickles as well. So they always say, I replied, focusing on her wounds. The scalds vanished into thin air. The skin didn't regenerate, instead, it went back to its place and became normal and healthy. It even helps with the bones, she added as I held her hand and circled the water around her arm. You know, I can help with that too, Katara, who was standing on the side, said all of a sudden. No need, I pulled my hand away. I've already finished. Then I stood up to my full height. Seeing that I was on a winning streak when it came to bets, I decided to tease the girls. I'd won 2 bets in one day. The price was obviously. So, anything, huh? I smiled smugly. Toph looked at me stoically, but her cheeks suddenly burned red. I mean, a girl like her, who could sense an entire population going about their private business, couldn't possibly miss a dirty joke. Man, it must be traumatizing to see your parents having romance without meaning to. No wonder Toph wanted to escape her home, I thought, but I kept that to myself. There were so many questions I wanted to ask her, but they were so inappropriate that even I didn't dare. For the record, I held back because you didn't seem to have any water. But, Toph said, I'm not going to back out of my end of the deal. And I've seen the way you look at me, so I won't mind. Before Katara could say anything, Toph was seriously getting on her nerves. I stepped in. So, why does everyone think I want romance? I asked directly. And how exactly did I look at you? Sure, I did. Who doesn't? But that's not what I wanted from her. Though she wasn't bad looking, my relationship with Katara was still fresh, and I wasn't bored. Yeah, how exactly did he look at you? Katara crossed her arms, standing in front of Toph, scoffing and bending down to her level. I wonder too. I can't see, after all, Toph replied smugly. Ugh. Katara was holding back a scream. So, what's your demand? Toph ignored her and asked me. I pondered a bit. I could tell her to follow me. But that would make her feel forced. It's okay. I'll teach you metalbending. It's not like you haven't passed the requirements already, I said. We're currently on a mission to spread metalbending and dustbending to help the Earth Kingdom hold back the Fire Nation. If you'd like to follow us for now, that would be great. If not, I'll just teach you metalbending. Of course, since I knew Toph was a runaway child, I knew she'd take me up on my offer. If she didn't, I would have ordered her around. Yes, I might be an asshole. But I needed her for the sake of freedom, mine included, which was most important to me. For sure. Tell me how to bend metal, she said. I reached into my pocket and grabbed a golden coin. Seeing it, I put it back, fished around again, and pulled out silver and copper coins. I put the silver one back and tossed the copper coin to Toph. She caught it. You have to understand, it's not about metal bending. It's about bending the earth particles within the metal. Usually, when an earthbender learns this, I have them bend the smallest amount of earth and then split it, over and over, until it becomes so small they can feel the earth particles. Since I looked at her feet, wondering why they were still pretty despite her walking barefoot all the time. Since you can see through your feet, or skin, you can definitely see the earth inside the metal. Now that you mention it, you're right, she said, holding the coin between her fingers and playing with it. After tossing it a few times, the coin started shifting shape. Toph waved her fingers, and the coin twisted further. Okay, Haru may be very talented, but compared to Toph, his talent is trash. Well, to be fair, Toph met the requirements for metal bending a long time ago, I thought. Toph chuckled. So that was the trick. Can't believe I missed it this whole time. Maybe because you weren't exposed to much metal. My parents never let me hold money or any kind of metal. I never had to buy anything because I had everything, she boasted. Guess if I'd been thrown into that metal prison rig, I could have figured out metal bending on day one. I blinked twice and forced a smile. She had no idea how right she was. Katara clapped her hands and smiled, like I usually would. Now that you've learned what you wanted, why don't you leave? Maybe if you're good, you can help other earthbenders learn it, Katara said. Toph narrowed her eyes and smirked. Don't worry, I won't steal your guy. This is the second time I'm saying it. Who said I'm worried? Katara turned to me. Ryak, should I be worried? I knew that if I teased her, I'd end up using my hand tonight. But then again, if I gave up every time because of the romance leverage she had, I'd turn from a man into a total pushover, and at the distant future, I would have to do the dishes to have some fun time. That would never happen. I decided to counter the trap question with another trap question. Time for a classic shonen anime protagonist reply. I reached into my pocket. I held my coins and counted them. Don't worry. She didn't steal me, I said. Ryak. Her eyes widened. With the water sense I've developed, no thief can steal me. Blind or not, I replied, my lips twitching as I held back laughter. Give me a direct answer, she demanded, desperate. I sighed and wrapped my arm around her shoulders, hugging her to my chest. Relationships are about mutual desire. No one can steal anyone. The relationship ends when the mutual desire ends. Got it? Yes. But. No buts, I interjected. You've got to understand that. If you want something to stop, it's about what you feel, not about what others do. No one can steal me, or you. People just walk away. Makes sense, Katara said, thinking over my words. But how do you know that? Do you have experience in relationships? Yes. I've dated tons of women. Remember the prison rig? I seduced every female guard there, I deadpanned. I wasn't going to play into her jealous act. Jealousy was fine by me, but it could get annoying. Geez. You could have just said it was obvious. She replied. Yes, even I can see that, Toph teased with a smile. In other words, even a blind girl could see it, but not you. Katara's eyelids twitched. Okay, I turned to Toph. So, what's your answer? I've got nothing to lose by following you. It could be fun, she admitted. Besides, you're pretty interesting. You have a water sense similar to mine. Also, she stood beside me. I can't take that loss well since I didn't go all out. So I can't miss the chance to smack you back. She waved her hand at my back. But because she was short, it landed as a clap. I shot her a glare I'd only reserve for my worst enemies. Meant to hit your back. Sorry, didn't see it, she smirked. Blame yourself for being tall. Or blame yourself for being too short, Katara added, pulling me to the other side so she and Toph stood next to each other. Now that I think about it, where's Sokka? He was talking to that big boobed lady. I thought, looking around. Well, if he doesn't show up by tomorrow, I'll leave without him. That was a low hit, Toph sneered. Let's talk later after we. Great, bounty hunters. I sighed, my water sense alerting me. Around the sparring area, trees and rocks provided cover, and behind many of them, people were hiding, clutching their weapons. The 100,000 gold isn't 100,000 for nothing, said a familiar voice. Katara flinched, taking a waterbending stance. Water from her pouch floated beside her, ready for any sudden attack. I turned my head and saw the referee from the underground matches, along with the guys I'd thought were just staff. They said 100,000 gold, that meant they wanted to hand me over to the Fire Nation. I couldn't blame them, though, I had thought of doing the same. The only difference was, in my version, I'd still be alive if I survived. You could have attacked any other day, I said, a weird sensation of euphoria washing over me. Tears welled up in my eyes. Today was my luckiest day. I'd won all my gambles, and I was getting enemies at just the right time. It was so polite of them to let me finish my spar with Toph, too. And? He asked. I raised my hand to the sky. The moon shone brightly, casting its light over the forest. I could feel my Kai raging calmly through my body, like my bending power was on steroids. Remember when I said I was more desperate to become a bloodbender than Vegeta was to become a Super Saiyan? I'm so happy. Today is my luckiest day. I wiped my tears with my hand, ignoring the strange looks I was getting. I hope your nuts have enough blood in them. What a strange man, said the leader of the bounty hunters. The only thing that's going is your head to them and 100,000 golden coins in my pocket. I had no obligation to reply to him. All I saw in front of me were 20 punching bags that had appeared at the right time. I channeled my Kai, feeling the surge of strength within me. I felt as though I could create a tsunami single-handedly if I were in the ocean. That's how much power I felt under the full moon. How about this, then? Katara stretched out her hand. The water from her pouch extended, forming 2 water whips, each ending in a sharp ice blade. Katara was already talented, as seen in the show. But thanks to my invented trick, healing the brain after training, she had picked up her lessons at an even more monstrous speed. Good grief. I was hoping for a breather, Toph said to the leader. This time, I won't hold back. Toph, why don't you join us, and we'll split the money equally? He replied. Money. Only poor folks like you think about that, she taunted, stepping forward. Each step she took created turmoil in the ground. I stretched out my left hand, stopping both Katara and Toph from moving. Stay aside, I said, turning my head to the bounty hunters with an innocent smile. They're mine. A muscular, bare-chested earthbender seemed to take offense at my attempt to take them on alone. He stomped on the ground and raised both hands, as if pushing something. A circle appeared on the earth where I stood, and I found myself floating into the air. The earthbender who had lifted me wore a smug expression as he watched me rise. I didn't know how to break it to them, but I, too, had been holding back. Thanks to the system, I had a set of skills that would allow me to kill them easily. But I wanted to use them to obtain bloodbending. I gathered saliva in my mouth and spat in their direction. The spit flew faster than anything they had ever seen. Suddenly, it turned into steam, enveloping them in a thick mist that quickly cooled. The split second their eyes lost sight of me was the moment I leapt off the rock and landed in the middle of their formation. Thanks to my stealth skill, I remained hidden as long as I stood in their blind spots. Of course, such a skill would be useless against someone like Toph, unless it was at a higher level. I stood behind them while they looked left and right, confused. They muttered among themselves, wondering how spit could create a fog that blinded them. But they reassured themselves that the fog would dissipate soon, so they needed to stay alert for any sneak attacks. They were wrong. If I wanted, I could have taken their lives long ago. From this distance, freezing any one of them would take less than a second. With a simple touch, I could dehydrate them completely. Compared to these earthbenders, who had spent most of their lives fighting underground, I had far more lethal experience. Where is that son of a fool? Growled a giant earthbender, looking around as the fog began to thin. I crouched behind him, my hand positioned between his legs. Playing with your kids, I joked as I focused on the water inside his body. A moving tent appeared in his pants, shifting left and right. At the same time, I mentally controlled 2 connected spheres, hitting them against each other. Mama! He screamed in pain. I took a step back and made a pulling motion. The earthbender was dragged by an invisible force, screaming until he passed out. Now, you might think these guys were allies, earthbenders blinded by greed, deciding to hand me over to the Fire Nation. I didn't blame them for that. But there was one thing. Even though I didn't blame them, showing mercy would only encourage more bounty hunters to see me as naive prey. I didn't need that kind of annoyance in my life. And honestly, I wasn't lacking sources of experience. Common earthbenders couldn't provide the same experience points as the monsters I could find in forests and deadly alleys. Defeating a strong earthbender. Plus 5,000 experience points. Okay, who's next? I said. The surprised earthbenders quickly took their stances and launched earth projectiles at me from every direction. I channeled my Kai, creating a defensive aura. The full moon has provided its power to the host. The spirit of the moon is lending its power to the host. All effects boosted by 200%. The earth projectiles flew toward me from all sides. A visible blue aura danced around my body like steam. I tried to dodge the attacks, but a few struck me. However, I noticed something strange. When the rocks hit me, the blue aura didn't act as a solid barrier. Instead, it behaved like a slippery, fluid substance. Each rock that hit me was pushed away by the aura, which seemed to pull and then push the rocks aside. More like a waterbending barrier, I thought to myself before deactivating the aura, as it was energy consuming. You're truly evil, just as the Fire Nation has portrayed you, yelled the leader of the bounty hunters. I raised my hand, forming a V symbol. At the same time, I focused on the water I wanted to bend. With a twist of my wrist, every male present, except for me, fell to their knees, moaning in pain. Do you know who my first kill was? I said as I walked around. It was a traitor who snitched on Katara for being a waterbender. I don't care what people like you think of me, whether I'm evil or not. I can forgive Fire Nation soldiers for following orders. But I can't forgive people like you, who betray their own for money or power. Katara, seeing everyone groaning in pain, approached me. How did you do that? She asked. Toph, who could sense what had happened, didn't give a direct answer. It's like metal bending. You look for the little water. What's that supposed to mean? Katara asked. Remember, Katara, when we have romance, and then suddenly remember we might have children. Oh, like when I or you would bend it. But this time, it can't get out, so it moves the organs. Oh my god. That's evil, she said, her eyes widening in realization. She covered her mouth with her hands. The man who had called me evil, now groaning in pain, mustered his courage and said, see. Even your woman agrees you're evil, arg. Katara pointed her hand at him and pulled backward. The man groaned in agony. I see, Katara said. Since testicles are small, they're easy to move. I was surprised she had learned it so quickly. Then again, she had mastered bloodbending in a single day in the show. And today was the full moon. That old lady who could only bloodbend small rats could control a crowd under the full moon. Never underestimate a waterbender under the full moon. Just so you know, it's not just men who have fluids. Just saying, I said. In other words, don't mess with me, or I'll mess with you. I know, she smirked, glancing at Toph. Then she looked at the men groaning in pain and asked, so, what do we do with them? There was a hint of sympathy in her expression. I pointed at them and said, if we don't make an example of them, more bounty hunters will come after us. I'll leave one alive to spread the tale. One by one, the earthbender bounty hunters began to freeze. The night, which hadn't started cold, ended in icy stillness. Toph hugged her arms, shivering. That's some really cold ice. Are all waterbenders this strong? Katara replied, no. It's just Ryak who's very good. Plus 75,000 experience points. Skill tree. Waterbending has unlocked a new skill. Plus skill. Pre-bloodbending. You can now bend blood under the full moon. To unlock further power-ups, increase your spiritual power. Ryak looked at the last bounty hunter earthbender, who turned and started to escape. Not going after him, Ryak watched as the man recovered from the hellish pain, crawled, and ran away. Would it be a good idea to let him go? You should think more about it. Katara lifted her hands and pulled backward, causing the man to fall, holding his groin in pain and screaming. She didn't want to let him go, not after they had tried to murder her boyfriend and hand him over to the Fire Nation. Not only that, but she was already pissed off. Toph had gotten under her skin, and she needed some breathing room. Ryak put his hand on her back and said, let him go. I need someone to spread the tale so no one else dares to attack us in the future. Toph shared her opinion. The earthbenders are straightforward people. They're greedy, most of those who fight underground are. If you let one of them go, he'll gather more people and attack you. Since she was 12, Toph had fought in underground tournaments. It had become her hobby after she started running away from home. Her routine was simple. Escape, fight, have her parents send someone to get her, and then pretend to be a lost blind girl. But thanks to her 4 years of traveling, the blind bandit had seen things most people never would in their whole lives. Not only was her vision broad, but she also had no blind spot and could see beyond walls. She had seen all kinds of people, and she knew one thing. You can't trust greedy people not to backstab you. Ryak seemed like a nice guy, a fun one, and she didn't want her fun journey to end before it began. Ryak looked at Toph and sighed. Don't sigh at me. It's advice from the heart, she pouted. You don't know men, Ryak smiled smugly. Toph let out a mocking chuckle. You'd be surprised by what I know. These greedy guys won't let you go. They'd risk their lives, and each of them will think, he spares some people. Why shouldn't I be the one he spares if I try my luck? I guess you've seen a lot. So tell me, what would these greedy people spend their money on? Women, mostly, she replied. Men spend money on women in different ways. Gifts, houses, and all sorts of things to satisfy their desires. She paused for a second. It might be about lust and not greed after all. Not with twisted balls, Ryak replied. He was certain no one would risk getting their balls twisted. At best, that escaping man would send his worst enemies and most hated people to experience hell at Ryak's hands. Toph tried to argue back. Family. You can still spend money on family. You have to feed them. Ryak shook his finger. You can't have a family without your balls. Toph lowered her head. So it's all about balls in the end. But what if you're already married? You have nothing to lose. Ryak smiled and shook his head. Although Toph's personality was quite hard to deal with, she was surprisingly easy to talk to. Besides, she seemed to be the kind of straightforward person who spoke her mind. She wasn't sneaky and could be trusted. Katara could also be trusted, and she was quite a caring woman. Okay, I believe we've forgotten about my brother, Katara said, covering her mouth. It didn't take long for the rumors to start spreading that night. By morning, everyone knew what Ryak had done to the bounty hunters, who happened to be the elites of underground earthbending tournaments. The news didn't stop in this city, it spread fast. By morning, Ryak was the main topic. Many people considered going after him, those deep in debt, those who desperately needed money, and those who believed that a portion of his bounty would make them rich for the rest of their lives without working. They all reconsidered. Even the idea of handing Ryak over to a friendly city in the Earth Kingdom was reconsidered, since that guy could bend the nuts. That day, Ryak wasn't just the coldest nightmare of the Fire Nation. He was the nightmare of every man in the world. An image of an evil waterbender doing unspeakable things. From that day on, a new legend was born. Mothers would scare their children, telling them that if they didn't study or do their chores, Ryak would visit them. And seeing how his name made the adults sweat, the children would believe they might get hurt. Achoo! Ryak rubbed his nose while looking at Sokka, who was sitting in the corner of the motel room. Where were you last night? Ryak asked. He was standing at the motel door, and it just so happened that Sokka had spent the night there. Sokka looked at Ryak and sighed deeply. She was married. Who? Ryak asked, not knowing what Sokka was talking about since he had spent all night making up with Katara. Toph had played on her nerves a lot, and contrary to what he had thought, he didn't end up using his hand. In fact, Katara had topped him, doing all the work and squeezing him dry. The only problem was that Sokka was here, so his sister couldn't just walk out of his room. She was just that shy. The love of my life, Sokka said, his voice grim and his eyes swollen. Can we talk inside your room? Sorry, it's a mess, Ryak replied. How messy can it be? Sokka asked. Messy enough to traumatize you. Geez, he grimaced. Anyway, that lady yesterday, she made me accompany her all day. But by the end, she told me she was married. Man, that's sad, Ryak replied. Did you do her? No. What kind of monster do you think I am, to do that to someone's wife? Sokka replied. I'm proud of you, said Ryak. Let's have some breakfast. I have no money, and I haven't hunted, Sokka replied. It's on me today. Eat as much as you want. Ryak extended his hand to him. Thanks. Sokka took Ryak's hand and stood up. After they walked out, Katara snuck out of Ryak's room. The sun shone brightly, and I looked at the sky. The feeling of empowerment provided by the full moon had gone away. After resting last night, I had pondered a lot about my pre-bloodbending and how to get to the next level. You might be wondering, Ryak, you have bounty hunters after you, and you dare to sleep in their city. I had a trick to sleep less. It didn't take me more than an hour of sleep to feel fresh. Well, Katara and I shared a ritual before bed. We would heal each other's bodies from toxins. I would do this more for Katara since she had been training, and healing her brain allowed her to speed up the process, which turned her into an asset. And you might be wondering, what do you do when you don't sleep? Thankfully, Katara didn't sleep either. As for what we did, Of course, it's grinding. But it's not about grinding levels. Back to the main topic. I had pondered a lot about yesterday. Pre-bloodbending. I hadn't been able to learn bloodbending, not because my waterbending skill was lacking, but because my spiritual power was less than required. It made sense. The crazy woman who invented bloodbending could only do it when the moon was full. Other than that, only Amon's family could do it without the full moon. Not even Katara could do it without the full moon. Now, I could think of two ways to fix that. 1. Increase the Kai bending level, which would increase the Kai efficiency, get my bending response faster, and thus my spiritual power. 2. I could look for methods to increase that power directly. Wan Shi Tong's library might have what I need. That was one more reason to visit the library and have Toph with me. The main reason would be to know when the comet would strike. I mean, it would allow me to think of the best course of action. If the comet had more than a year to descend, it means that the avatar isn't meant to emerge yet. If it has, let's say, 6 months, that would be an emergency to launch a full-scale attack on the Fire Nation. I may even ask our cousin tribe in the North Pole to help them with learning metal bending faster. So, what are you thinking? Asked Sokka. Currently, we were in a rented carriage heading to Omashu. When you have money, it's easy to even have space for your tiger to travel with you. The driver was a very nice person and polite. When I asked him if I could bring my tiger, he smiled and waved his hand, saying it was fine. Though, I thought I should try to heal him later. He'd been sweating while talking to me, which is a bad health indicator. Toph was petting Lucy, while Katara was playing with a small water bead in the air, splitting it into the smallest beads as much as possible for her. Nothing much, I answered Sokka. We may stop on the road. Stopping on the road would give me occasional experience points. After all, traveling the kingdom on land was much different than using a flying bison. I opened the system and looked at my accumulated experience points. I had around 330,000 XP. My Kai bending was at level 11. This will get me to level 13. In waterbending, that's Grandmaster level. Let's see. 300k experience points have been used. Kai bending has leveled up. You have achieved the level of a beginner Grandmaster. Kai bending has been elevated. Kai bending level 13. You have achieved the level of a complete Grandmaster. You can now absorb Kai from the atmosphere and spiritual places to increase spiritual energy. Recommended places compatible with host, ocean and full moon days. Great, I've become a Superman who now needs the ocean or the moon. Kai usage has been reduced by 70%. You can now use Kai outside the body and shoot it. The effects of previous skills have been upgraded by 50%. Waterbending skill tree has detected a compatible skill tree. You have now unlocked bloodbending. Numerous notifications hit my ears. Despite the continuous ding sounds, a big smile appeared on my face. It drew the attention of everyone here. Someone looks happy, Katara said, looking at me strangely. What's so funny? Right now, I was just lying on Lucy's fur, smiling like an idiot. Of course, I'd look like an idiot since no one but me could see the system screen. Well, he didn't orgasm, that's for sure, Toph commented. Can't you hear how ridiculous you sound? Katara replied, annoyed. I raised my hand and said, I just remembered something funny from the past. Seriously. You guys have funny stuff at the South Pole. Toph wondered, pointing at Sokka with her thumb. This guy said you only had old people and children to take care of, and he boasted that he taught you how to fish. He's lying, I replied. But his sister taught me waterbending. The basics of the basics, Katara replied. But you discovered the rest on your own and ended up becoming my teacher. That only means your talent is just as bad, Toph said. Katara raised her hand and made a V symbol while turning her head toward Toph. Toph quickly reached out, grabbed Sokka by the shoulder, and pulled him in front of her. The earthbenders had strong bodies, so she could carry him with one arm. Sokka quickly held his crotch and winced in pain. What the hell? Sokka groaned. Oops, sorry, Katara replied, biting her tongue. I smiled, amused. This would be the perfect time to use the weed I'd looted from the Fire Nation. At least, that is, until I find a dangerous place to learn bloodbending. Well, not exactly learn, but test it. The system had a great feature called instant learning when leveling up. Man, I closed my eyes and decided to forget about bloodbending for a moment. Though I wouldn't forget it anytime soon, I'd been dying to achieve it. I decided to think about kite bending. Apparently, I could now increase my own spiritual power by breathing in the air. Not only that, but I could use the kai outside my body. I was so curious that I didn't want to test it in secret. I raised my hand and looked at it. A blue, steam-like aura appeared above my hand. What are you doing? Sokka asked, seeming to have recovered. Just using my bending energy, I explained simply. I pointed my hand at the ceiling and shot the energy. A blue beam of light shot from my hand and pierced the ceiling. I felt 25% of my energy deplete. But it was worth it. It was so instant, so fast, and so damaging. A perfect hole was created in the wooden ceiling. Sorry. I'll pay for that, I yelled. Are you sure that's steam? Katara looked up. Doesn't feel like one. I didn't feel anything, said Toph. What did you do? Aren't you supposed to not see when your feet aren't touching the ground? Though I wonder how you know that. Yes. But I'm still wondering what you did. I'm not deaf, you know, she scolded. Don't worry about it. A technique I'm working on, I said. Speaking of techniques, there's something I want to do. Is it about waterbending? Katara asked, sounding interested. Yes, I nodded. Can I tag along? She asked. Sure, I gave her a thumbs up. I don't recommend stopping by this place, the carriage driver advised as we stopped in front of a valley. Dead trees were scattered all around. The land seemed dry and lacked any source of water. Not to mention, the smell of rotten flesh and the metallic scent of blood filled the air. He's got a point, Toph said, putting her hand on the ground. There are beasts, large ones, living underground. They're like insects. Ew, cockroaches, but big ones. What's a cockroach? Katara asked. Why, don't you have insects at the South Pole? Toph asked, genuinely confused. Katara and Sokka looked at each other, sounding equally confused. She's talking about the little animals, I said, looking forward, remembering my PTSD from facing that giant centipede. They couldn't possibly survive the cold, Toph. So no, other than beasts that can survive the cold weather, there aren't any. Makes sense. And here I thought you guys were living under a rock. Well, rocks have insects under them, Toph shrugged. Anyways, are you serious about going in there with your woman just to test new techniques? Shouldn't you wait for new bounty hunters to show up? She seemed to be the voice of reason. Yes. I don't want my sister to get trapped by beasts in a closed location, Sokka said, glaring at me threateningly. But I want to go, and I'll be fine, Katara argued with Sokka. But you won't have enough water. It's too dangerous to go, Sokka insisted. You know, animals, big or small, all breed, I raised my hand. In the worst case, Katara won't be trapped. The beasts will be trapped with her. Fine. But I swear if anything happens to her. So, you're saying she's my responsibility. Obviously, he crossed his arms, scowling. Thanks for acknowledging me, brother-in-law, I smiled and bumped his shoulder with my fist. A few veins appeared on his face, but he didn't say a word. And so, I walked with Katara into the valley. I'm excited, I admitted after we had put some distance between us. Katara looked at me with wide eyes. She scolded, unbelievable. Just because you got excited and wanted some alone time, you brought me to the most dangerous place possible. I looked at her, my jaw dropping a bit. I think she misunderstood what I meant by excitement. Don't give me the, Couldn't you hold yourself back a little until we found a private place? My brother is worried to death, she replied, blushing a bit. She seemed flattered and angry at the same time, but she suppressed her happiness and tried to keep a scowling face. That's not what I was excited about, I said, about to clear up the misunderstanding. But then, a giant centipede, about 5 meters long, appeared. I pointed at it. What? Katara yelped, raising her guard and grabbing water from her water pouch. That's a small one, I commented, thinking about how I should approach bloodbending. The system had allowed me to gain instant muscle memory when I leveled up. But this time, I didn't gain a new level. Instead, I received the movement set for bloodbending. Should I try to bend with my mind, or should I familiarize myself with the blood? Ryak, Katara said. I don't think we can bend this one. I smirked. What else does it have besides the liquid of life? She rolled her eyes. Flesh, bones, blood, power enough to kill us. The centipede stood tall before charging at us. I pointed my hands at it, then thrust to the left. The small centipede's trajectory shifted, and it flew into a nearby rock. God, this is heavy, I complained. I need more practice, the moon, or more spiritual power. I waved my hands again, making the creature float in the air before slamming it down. What in the polar bears is that? Katara was clearly dazed. You're bending its whole body. Yes, I replied. Feeling a bit tired, I decided to finish the fight. As I lifted the centipede for another slam, its body froze completely. When it hit the ground, it shattered into pieces. Defeating a young 20-year-old centipede king. Plus 8k accumulated experience points. That's bloodbending, I panted. Well, the first part of it. The human body is mostly made of water. If you can bend the water, you can freeze it. If not, just focus on freezing the blood. It feels quite heavy, she said. Only then did I realize she was pointing her hands at me. I could feel a slight tingle, but she was quite weak. She got the hang of it instantly, but she wasn't capable of doing it yet. I gave her a glare, a look of shock and betrayal. What? I was being gentle, Katara smiled bitterly. What about that? I pointed at the centipede. You see how big that thing is? She asked. Forget about it, I said. Don't attempt it until the full moon. Well, actually, you have tonight and tomorrow. Why? Wasn't the full moon yesterday? It lasts between 2 and 3 days. Awesome, she said. I get why you were excited now. We'll have to do plenty of practice, I replied, looking at her. For now, we should practice until we no longer need the full moon. Well, that's in your case, if you can do it. In my case, I would keep practicing until I could do it with my mind. And with the ability to increase my Kai in the ocean or during the full moon, I definitely have an easier time in a few months or years. Anyways, I might need to increase my Kai bending levels. I don't know. It seems interesting, Katara said. I didn't think she'd approve of this technique, unlike in the original timeline. But in the original timeline, the old crazy woman used bloodbending to kidnap innocent civilians of the Fire Nation. Well, not innocent, but not as criminal as soldiers. It can be painful, very powerful, and considered very evil. More evil than what you did last night? She asked. No, but it's not about evil or good. Bending is a tool, and you can use it accordingly. I scratched my chin. I felt a pang of guilt, to be honest. But I had desperately wanted to be a bloodbender. Imagine how awesome it would be to go to the Fire Nation, invade the Fire Lord's palace, bloodbend everyone, humiliate them, and end the war before walking out. Makes sense, she said, her voice worried. Besides, with this, it'll be easy to protect our people if the Fire Nation decides to go after the South Pole. No need to worry. They have a bunch of metal benders and dust benders expanding knowledge about explosives and metal bending to worry about, I said. Let's continue hunting small animals. Remind me what's small again? Katara asked, giving the remains of the centipede a side glance. 2 weeks later, as Ryak and his group were traveling on land, practicing and hunting together, the continent wasn't as calm as their journey. The continent wasn't as peaceful as everyone had thought it would be. Well, it had been at war. However, the tides of the war had started to shift ever since a group of 100 benders began spreading across the continent, teaching metal bending and dust bending. Many cities had acquired the training methods for these new types of sub-bending. Moreover, it was advised that they focus on dust bending, especially glass bending and explosive powder bending. Currently, one of the men Ryak had taught was standing before the door of a city occupied by the Fire Nation, leading a small rebellion. Haru, with around 10 men, was running in one direction. Behind them, there were around 400 soldiers. They had just been caught trying to free the earthbender prisoners from the metal prison. Haru turned his head, avoiding fire streams aimed at him as he ran. Haru. Not yet. Wait, Haru thought, as Ryak would have, and did the same. Now. As he yelled, the earthbenders turned, stomped, and pushed forward. The dust rose from the ground, moving in the opposite direction and creating a strong wind current. The firebenders covered their faces. The earthbenders didn't stop with just spreading the dust. Instead, they bent it into different forms, compressing it into tornadoes and moving them into different spots. The explosive powder had the potential to spread, and they didn't want to be caught in it. Now, create friction, Haru ordered. The dust hit against each other, creating sparks. Boom boom boom. Although the explosive powder didn't have the same explosive power or ingredients as a full-scale bomb, it was enough. Ryak had taught him that stronger explosive dust could be made by mixing higher-grade materials that required a higher temperature to explode. But as long as there was charcoal and sulfur, it would suffice. The force of the 400 soldiers had been reduced to barely 100. The earth benders, who had been running, changed direction and started chasing after the fire soldiers. Since the latter were wearing metallic armor, it was easier to deal with them. Without a significant numerical advantage, the earth benders, now metal benders, could hold their own. The Fire Nation's greatest asset, their technology and armor, was now working against them. One couldn't simply be a good soldier or firebender when they found themselves flying in the air or worse, being thrown into their allies. The soldiers began retreating back to the city, either to get more backup, hostages, or whatever else they could manage. One of the earth benders pulled something from his pocket. A black rock. He threw it in their direction. Haru clapped his hands, and the rock suddenly turned to dust, which spread into a cloud. Boom. The soldiers who didn't die collapsed, suffering severe injuries and burns. Haru looked at the earthbender who threw the rock. That rock wasn't just any rock. It was compressed explosive powder. One of their group had come up with this idea, a dust grenade. It could only be made by earth benders, since only they could compress and decompress earth. But to make it effective, the dust needed to be spread before it exploded, so it could cover a larger area. It's finally over, commented a middle-aged man. Yeah, Haru wiped the sweat from his forehead. Honestly, I thought we were going to die. Thankfully, we set traps in advance, said Tyro. Yeah, Ryak's way of fighting is really efficient. Though, I wonder why he didn't continue fighting, added Zaru, Tyro's friend. Haru interjected, I may be wrong, but didn't the Fire Nation send a massive force from all directions a few days after we left, and we were chased across the road? If we had stayed, wouldn't we have died? I was about to say that. Hey, I'm not stupid. I'm just saying he could have figured out something. Like what? I'm not him to think like him. Haru smiled. He and the metal benders entered the city to take it over. They went to the prison, a place made entirely of metal, to cripple the powers of the earth benders. But it did nothing to stop the metal benders from freeing their companions. The prison held around 200 prisoners. 150 of them were earth benders, and the rest were just ordinary criminals who had committed crimes against the Fire Nation. Of course, the enemy of the enemy is a friend. Once everyone was freed and the city was under control, the metal benders politely asked the Fire Nation colonizers to leave through the front door, leaving behind food and money. Similar events were happening across the continent. Some metal benders weren't as patient and thought they should gather forces and attack nearby bases. Of course, not all of them succeeded. After all, numerical advantage is an absolute advantage at a certain scale, and a capable strategist would be a tough opponent. But the good news was that metalbending was spreading. Those who couldn't learn it at least drew up manuals and wrote instructions on how to learn it before sending them to nearby places. 2 weeks later, I placed my hand on top of my head and looked at the city in the distance. It was still far away, but there it was, nestled between the mountains, the city of Omashu. It was considered a kingdom of its own. Such geography and location. It'll prevent the Fire Nation from invading and make defense easier, I remarked. I guess it's still so far away since I can't see it, Toph yawned, looking ahead. Over the last 2 weeks, the group had grown closer as they traveled together. Toph was the friendly, teasing type of girl, always throwing out comments you couldn't take seriously. Occasionally, she'd complain about bugs and mosquitoes, but she was quite useful. She could detect danger, underground water sources, and even hidden beasts that liked to attack from beneath. She'd occasionally hunt small animals for dinner or lunch. Katara had been practicing her new form of bending, bloodbending. During the 3 days of the full moon, she had quickly mastered it, thanks to her talent and my training. She still couldn't bend humans without the full moon, but at least she could bend small animals. And she was learning how to move them on her own. Sokka was just an annoying overprotective brother. On the other hand, I could move humans completely. But I was limited by the quantity. My guess was that once I leveled up again, be it through waterbending or kai bending, I'd be able to bend a countless number. Well, it wasn't like I was helpless without bloodbending. Nut bending was already handy and easier to do. Most importantly, steam bending was incredibly overpowered, considering how I could turn a small amount of water into a large volume with it. And I had been gaining a lot of experience points over the past 2 weeks from my occasional hunts, and my waterbending was halfway to leveling up. Waterbending level 14, 200,000 400,000. It just so happened that I had 300k experience points, which I planned to use later. Ryuk, I need your help, Toph suddenly called me, holding a skinned rabbit in a bowl. Sure, I replied. What is it? Can you steam this? She asked. Sure, I answered. In the mountain range, a scout from the Fire Nation had been observing. Ever since discovering metal bending and dust bending, the Fire Nation had been on high alert. They didn't mind that some small cities had picked it up. But the real problem would be when a major city got hold of these new bending techniques and explosive formulas. The Fire Nation had increased the number of scouts and squads near major cities. To see Ryuk, who became a symbol himself, was quite huge surprise. Expected, but a huge surprise. Look at that. There is only 4 of them, and just a pet, smirked one of the scouts while having a bead of sweat dropping from his chin. Ryuk walked with the group, carrying a large backpack on his back. After sharing a meal with Toph and the rest, they continued their march toward Omashu. Given the distance, the trip would only take a few more hours, and that was what he hoped for. At the same time, Toph was looking down at the ground. She seemed to be in a bad mood, keeping her distance from the group. He turned around. Katara hadn't argued with her, as she had grown used to Toph's teasing in her presence. In fact, they had become quite good friends. And they were girls, so they had their girl talk. Sokka and Ryuk had their own boy talk, but it mostly revolved around Fire Nation strategies, countermeasures, and whether they could reach their destination in time. He was a very protective brother, and Ryuk knew Sokka would risk his life for Katara, even without power. Seeing Toph in such a bad mood, almost sad, Ryuk couldn't help but soften a little. He approached her. Toph, is something bothering you? Ryuk asked. Toph lifted her head but didn't smile or show any emotion. Not at all, she said shortly. Are you sure? He pressed. She sounded serious, which wasn't like her usual self. Yes, she replied, unwilling to share her concerns. Are you? Ryuk asked again, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know we've only been traveling together for 2 or 3 weeks, but if you want to share something or get something off your chest, I'm here. She sighed. To be honest, she did want to say what was on her mind. But she hesitated, fearing she would be mocked. Still, she decided to let it out. It wasn't like she couldn't beat him up if he laughed or something. My parents, usually, by this time, a lackey or a mercenary would have shown up to take me home. But no one's here. Although I should feel happy, I'm actually disappointed. Toph couldn't believe she had opened up to him. She didn't need to see his face to know how he reacted. He simply nodded in understanding. It must be tough, thinking about it all the time, he said sympathetically, and he was being completely honest. Usually, I'd complain. But it's been 2 months, and I don't know how to feel. If they haven't sent someone after me, either they've given up on me, or something bad has happened to them, she admitted. Her concerns were reasonable. Anyway, I just wanted to clear the air before things got messy, Ryuk said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Are you talking about some kind of romantical tension? She asked with a smirk, teasing him. Never thought you'd want to break someone's heart. Seriously. You're not feeling anything? Ryuk asked her honestly. Toph's eyes widened. Was he confessing? With her ability to sense his body's subtle movements, she could tell he wasn't joking. Her heart skipped a beat. Well, to be honest, it's complicated. You're not half bad, and I'm just a teenage girl traveling with a guy alone, she said, her cheeks turning pink. Though, I'm going to need some time to think about it. She had opened up a little more. Ryuk didn't look at her. Instead, he turned his head away. His heart skipped a beat as well. There seemed to be a misunderstanding on her part. Sure, she was pretty, pale, and short, quite his type, but the thing was, he hadn't been talking about that kind of feeling. I was talking about the army heading our way and blocking the escape routes, Ryuk said. I'm picking up distant sounds, talk of killing 4 people, trapping them between the mountains or setting up an ambush. What? Toph asked. She stomped the ground more forcefully. Now that you mention it, I can feel some movement. It's far, so it's unclear. Ryak looked in one direction. His power wasn't like Toph's. Visually, it was lacking, especially in range. But when it came to sound, his sense of hearing was incredibly sharp, allowing him to pick up sounds from great distances. Behind him, Toph was blushing like crazy. She closed her eyes, thinking, that was weird. I'll pretend I was joking later. But the problem was that she could sense his biological reactions. And it seemed that their conversation had caused his blood to rush somewhere. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself. So, what do we do now? She asked Ryak. The siblings were clueless, so they wouldn't be involved in the emergency planning. Over the weeks of traveling together, she had realized that Ryak was the one who made the tough decisions, so she asked him directly. I think we should have 2 plans, Ryak said. 1. If there's an exit, we focus on defense and mobility. Lucy can carry 3 people now, and I should be able to handle myself with a bit of waterbending to slide away. And if there's no exit? She asked. That's easy, Ryak said with a grin. As a matter of fact, that would be even easier, thanks to you. I know I'm awesome, she replied. Ryak chuckled, and she smiled back. Ryak, you're joking, right? Sokka asked as the 4 of them walked. Katara and Sokka were riding on Lucy's back. Sokka had his boomerang in hand, ready for any potential danger. His stress was justified. After all, I had told him there was an army setting a trap for us. And it didn't take a genius to realize they had squads waiting for us. In fact, I figured they probably had an elite squad ready for the metalbending master in Ba Sing Se. Yes, I was joking, I deadpanned. Sokka didn't buy it. He frowned and said, I swear, if we make it out of this. Don't worry, Katara said. I'll protect you. She was riding behind him. I'm not that weak, Sokka grumbled. Well, I guess we'll go with your second plan, Toph said. What does that mean? Katara asked. It means, I answered, that all of our escape routes are blocked by soldiers. Sokka and Katara looked around, but they saw nothing. No need to look around, Toph said. Only Ryak and I can sense them. I can only hear them from this distance, I added. I could see using my water sense, but the range wasn't as large as I had hoped. However, it allowed me to see in all directions and even detect what people were carrying behind their backs. Though, thankfully, I couldn't see everything, which I was very grateful for. I could also hear Katara's heart pounding. Sokka wasn't much better, his face was quite pale. I didn't blame him. No matter how strong you are, numbers matter. Sure, I could probably take on 100 men on a good day, though I wasn't sure. But fighting an army while being surrounded. That was another story. The only advantage I saw was that this was a narrow path. And we had an earthbender. Ryak, we're approaching them, Toph said, fully focused. I cleared my throat. We'd had a weird moment an hour ago, and I was sure things would get awkward later. But for now, I needed to focus on the Fire Nation's trap. At my signal, ride Lucy, I ordered. Don't worry about me. Worry about yourself, she said confidently. Okay, I replied. Soon, the vibrations in the ground became more pronounced. Sokka noticed small rocks shaking and muttered, they're here. A man clad in red armor appeared first. Behind me, a marching army emerged. And that wasn't all. According to Toph, they were coming from every direction. In front of me, I could count about 200 soldiers. Okay, Toph. Do it when I say, I ordered. For now, hold. I smirked. Thanks for watching.